Marilena Rosa Re was a 58-year-old woman living with her husband in Castellanza, Italy. They had two grown daughters who lived on their own and had children of their own, making Marilena a grandmother. She worked as a promoter in supermarkets located in the province of Varese. By 2017, she viewed herself as a successful individual, enjoying a peaceful life while taking care of her family. On Sunday, July 30th, 2017, Marilena and her husband visited a mutual friend's house for dinner in a nearby town. They spent a few hours there before returning home together to Castellanza. It was a typical quiet evening for them. However, once they arrived home, her husband had other plans. He planned to visit his elderly mother in the nearby town, as she was unwell and needed help with housework. He was absent all evening and night, returning home the next morning around 10:30 a.m. He expected to find his wife at home since she usually left for work later. Typically, at that time, she would be enjoying her morning routine, having breakfast, getting ready, and occasionally doing some cleaning. To his surprise, Marilena was missing. Initially, her husband thought she might have gone to work earlier than usual, possibly due to a last-minute request. However, Marilena always communicated any changes to her schedule and would not just disappear without notice. Moreover, that morning, she had planned to spend time with him to discuss their future plans and some important matters. He started to feel anxious and tried to reach Marilena. After several unsuccessful attempts to call her mobile phone, he noticed it was turned off, which was unusual for her as she was always reachable during work hours. When he checked the house, he discovered more worrying signs. Her bag containing personal items and documents was missing, but her car was parked in the yard. This was strange since she never left without her car. Concerned, he went outside to look around the neighborhood. He talked to several neighbors who were awake and working in their gardens, but none of them had seen or heard anything unusual. He also called his daughters, but they had not heard from their mother either. Marilena's phone still remained off. Feeling restless, he decided to contact the police. However, they informed him that they could not file a missing person report until 24 hours had passed. It was not until July 31st, when he returned to the police station, that his report was finally accepted and the search began. During this time, he couldn't get in touch with Marilena. He reached out to everyone who knew her, including her daughters, relatives, and colleagues, but no one had seen her. By the time the police acknowledged the report of her disappearance, the management and staff at the supermarkets were already worried because she hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. Marilena was known for her punctuality and reliability. She never missed a shift, so her absence raised great concern. The police interviewed all of Marilena's co-workers. They were shocked by her disappearance and found no indications that anything was wrong. No one was aware of any issues she might have been dealing with, nor did it seem like she had plans for a long trip or any reason to leave unexpectedly. The last person to see and talk to Marilena was her husband, making him the first person law enforcement wanted to question. Detectives interviewed him multiple times to understand what happened before her disappearance. They aimed to find out if the couple had any issues that might have led Marilena to leave or if anyone harbored ill will toward her. Her husband found these suggestions ridiculous and dismissed them, stating that their family had never been involved in crime or shady activities, and they did not have any enemies. Detectives interviewed Marilena's friends and found that they had no useful information. Her husband mentioned one concerning detail: the family was facing financial troubles, owing €10,000 to the bank. However, this lead seemed unhelpful since they were consistently making payments on the loan. He also provided documentation proving that both he and Marilena were fulfilling their financial obligations without issues. The police explored various possibilities, ranging from a voluntary disappearance to a potential crime, but after several days, they had no concrete answers. Meanwhile, Marilena had not used her phone or bank cards, raising concerns about her well-being, as it's difficult for anyone to survive long without money, a phone, or a car. A press conference was held to gather more information about Marilena's disappearance, and a television appeal was broadcasted to raise awareness. The prosecutor's office requested a detailed description of the missing woman, which was shared on all channels along with a call for eyewitnesses to come forward. Unfortunately, this effort did not lead to any new information. To assist with the search, specially trained dogs were brought in. The dogs were taken around the house and the area by the gate, but they remained calm and did not indicate any scent. The courtyard and Marilena's car were also searched without any success. Additionally, Marilena's relatives appeared on television, made several public statements, and directly reached out to her in hopes of getting a response. Days went by, but Marilena was still missing. The critical timeframe for finding her alive had passed, and anxiety deepened as troubling thoughts arose. Her husband and daughters felt increasingly worried. Law enforcement still issued a nationwide appeal through various media to widen the search efforts. Meanwhile, relatives created and distributed flyers featuring Marilena's photo throughout the city. A week later, the police had almost lost hope of finding her alive and shifted their focus to the surrounding area, trying to identify anyone who might have been involved in her possible murder or kidnapping. Naturally, close relatives, especially her husband, became suspects. He was the last known person to have spent time with her. He claimed he was at his mother's house during the time she went missing, which raised suspicions. After appearing on television, he acted cautiously, seemingly avoiding drawing attention to himself. He explained this behavior by saying he wanted to evade media scrutiny, but law enforcement grew suspicious that there might be a more concerning reason behind his actions. Consequently, they began to investigate him more thoroughly. Detectives confirmed that the evening after her husband brought her home, he went to help his sick mother with housework. Neighbors saw them arrive together, and several witnesses confirmed that he left almost immediately afterward. He was not seen again until the next morning. Neighbors near his mother's house also supported his story, stating he arrived late in the evening, and the timing matched perfectly. CCTV cameras along the road recorded his car traveling to and from his mother's house at the times he mentioned. His alibi appeared solid and did not raise any suspicions. However, investigators were not quick to remove him from the list of suspects, as close acquaintances are often implicated in such cases. Therefore, they returned to that neighborhood hoping to gather more information from former neighbors. Local residents were interviewed, and detectives meticulously investigated Marilena's previous social circle to find any suspicious individuals who might have had an interest in the kidnapping or potential violent actions. At this stage, her husband appeared to be an unlikely suspect for several reasons. He and his wife were widely regarded as loving partners with minimal disagreements. He had no financial incentive to cause her harm, and he had a solid alibi. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to progress as new leads surfaced. After speaking with the couple's acquaintances at their former residence, the Carabinieri shifted their focus to Vito Clerico, a 64-year-old man who was well acquainted with Marilena and her husband, lived nearby. From the outset, Vito displayed a cautious demeanor and seemed anxious. During questioning, he changed his story multiple times, which raised significant suspicions. The investigation team focused on Marilena's neighbor to gather more information. Background checks revealed that he had no criminal record, and his relationship with Marilena did not initially cause any concerns. A mutual friend mentioned that they met at work when Marilena was a promoter at shopping centers. This was Vito working as a storekeeper at Marilena's workplace. Their jobs frequently brought them together, leading to regular communication. The friend described Vito as irresponsible, noting that he had a history of borrowing large amounts of money from others and either not repaying it or repaying it late. There were also rumors that Marilena had lent him money during their time together, which could suggest a possible motive for the crime. As a result, he was called in for questioning. During the interview at the station, Vito described receiving a call from Marilena on the night she disappeared. She asked to meet him at the station in Garbagnac Milanese, explaining that her husband was visiting his sick mother and could not assist her. She mentioned having important business in the city. Vito, being friends with her, agreed to meet, but Marilena never showed up. Initially, he thought she changed her mind and went home. However, several aspects of his story seemed suspicious. First, the timing was too late for any business dealings. Second, the timeline Vito provided did not align with the information the police had confirmed. According to the timeline, Marilena should have been preparing to go to the station while she was with her friends, but no one confirmed that she had any plans to go anywhere or contacted anyone. Additionally, since her husband was nearby, she could have asked him for help. All of this seemed illogical. Due to these inconsistencies, detectives decided to investigate Vito's account further. They discovered that his mobile phone was never registered on the route he claimed to have taken. Furthermore, he was not seen on any surveillance cameras, including those at the station. If Vito was telling the truth, he should have appeared on video. The most intriguing discovery was that the detectives found a woman in the recordings who looked like Marilena. This indicated that she had indeed visited Garbagnac Milanese, from which she never returned. Upon examining Vito's mobile phone, the detectives confirmed that he had received several calls in the days leading up to her disappearance. Marilena had repeatedly tried to contact him, but he had consistently ignored her. However, on the night she disappeared, there was no call from her to him. Instead, there was a single outgoing call from Vito to her number on the evening of July 30th, 2017. This evidence directly contradicted his account of events. During the conversation, one of the detectives spotted dark red stains on Vito's trousers that looked like blood. Vito quickly claimed that he raised rabbits and that the stains might have come from butchering one of them, as he owned around 40 rabbits. However, the police doubted his story, confiscated the trousers, and sent them to a lab for testing. The analysis confirmed that the stains were human blood, specifically matching that of Marilena. Vito was unable to explain this finding. On September 11, 2017, he was arrested, 40 days after Marilena had disappeared. He was charged with murder and concealing her body. During interrogations, Vito provided confusing and inconsistent accounts that varied from day to day, filled with odd details, but he did not provide any clear confessions or truth. Eventually, he was worn down and agreed to tell investigators where Marilena's body, while still denying that he was the murderer. He claimed he helped the real killer hide her body out of fear for himself and his wife. Vito was compelled to assist in disposing of a body, and he kept the identity of Marilena's killer a secret. On September 12, authorities began excavating his backyard, specifically in a small garden in Garbagnac Milanese. At the exact spot Vito indicated, they found a shallow grave approximately 40 centimeters deep. Inside, they discovered a decapitated body wrapped in multiple layers of polyethylene and placed in a bag, which was partially covered in concrete. The advanced decomposition of the remains and the missing head complicated the identification process. Although the clothing resembled Marilena's, there were no identifying features, like tattoos, scars, or fractures, to confirm her identity. As a result, identification needed to be made using dental records. In the meantime, police continued to search for the missing head. Vito, for unknown reasons, refused to cooperate with law enforcement. His behavior was quite unusual, leading them to suspect he might be feigning mental disorders to claim insanity during the trial and evade punishment for the murder. It was revealed that he had been diagnosed with minor mental health issues in the past and had taken medication, but he had recently stopped. Eventually, under pressure from detectives, Vito started talking again. He claimed that he not only helped hide Marilena's body but also beheaded her after the murder. He said a certain killer had ordered him to do this. The decapitation was a deliberate act to make identification more difficult. Vito stated that he had thrown the head in a dumpster. Given how much time had passed, it was likely that the head had already been taken to a dump outside the city, making it nearly impossible to find. However, the authorities were skeptical. Every claim he made needed to be verified. While interrogating Vito, the police also spoke with his family members. One of them mentioned that Vito owned several plots of land. He recalled seeing Vito heading toward one of the most remote plots the day after Marilena's disappearance. This plot was an abandoned field located between Garbagnac Milanese and the town where Marilena lived. The suspect owned property there but typically did not visit without a valid reason. The family members speculated that Vito might have gone to this isolated area to dispose of Marilena's head. Before beginning their search for the head, the police rechecked Vito's mobile phone. This allowed them to confirm that he had indeed traveled to that location, helping to narrow down the search area. A large search team was organized, which included specially trained dogs. The task was made more difficult by the thick growth of blackberries in most of the area. The team thoroughly searched the abandoned field. A few hundred meters from the road, they found a bag hidden in the bushes. It was the same bag that Marilena usually took with her for errands and shopping. Inside the bag was Marilena's head. On September 26th, the body was finally confirmed to be that of Marilena Re, a 58-year-old woman who had been missing. However, one question still lingered: what was the motive behind her murder? It is believed that it was likely connected to financial issues. Investigators discovered that in 2014, Marilena had loaned Vito and his wife a significant amount of money, approximately 80,000 euros, from her savings. Vito had persuaded a mutual acquaintance that he and his wife were struggling with the bank due to overdue loans and were at risk of losing their home. Trusting his word, Marilena lent him the money, believing he was honest. In the following years, Vito repeatedly delayed paying back the debt, relying on Marilena's patience and her lack of urgent financial needs. However, Marilena eventually needed the money and requested a quick repayment. When Vito failed to return the funds, she had to take out a bank loan, planning to pay it off as soon as she received her repayment from Vito. Despite her growing insistence on getting her money back, Vito still did not repay the debt. On that significant evening, after her husband went to visit his mother, Marilena likely chose to confront Vito about the money. It is unclear how she ended up in the nearby city. During their discussion, Vito refused to return the money, which prompted a violent reaction from Marilena. This led to a conflict that escalated into a fight. A forensic expert noted that before Marilena was beheaded, she was hit on the head with a blunt object at least 6 times. The specifics are hard to determine due to multiple fractures in her skull and facial bones. Additionally, the remains had deteriorated significantly, complicating the examination further. After the murder, Vito cut off his victim's head, buried the body in a shallow grave near his house, wrapped it in several layers of plastic, and partially covered it with concrete. He had only a small amount of building materials, which was insufficient to fully hide the burial site. He placed the head inside her bag, took it out of town, and threw it deep into the thorny bushes on his remote property, hoping it would never be discovered. Even though the reconstruction of the events was supported by various pieces of evidence, Vito did not confess to the crime. Searches of his house and car found traces of blood and indirect evidence suggesting that he was not alone in committing the crime. Unfortunately, not all details could be uncovered. Vito completely denied any involvement of his wife or anyone else, claiming that a third party was responsible but refusing to identify them. After several interrogations, he ultimately took the blame for the crime. Vito's defense attorney claimed that his confession was coerced, noting that he had been questioned at least 10 times and believed his rights were violated. Initially, he only admitted to hiding the remains but did not confess to murder. However, he later claimed to have killed Marilena. Eventually, his story changed again, and he denied everything. The lawyer suggested that someone else must have committed the crime, indicating the possible involvement of a third party. However, this theory could not be supported by witnesses or the evidence gathered. Without any solid leads on the identity of this mysterious person, the idea was dismissed. All of Vito's inconsistent statements, which raised suspicions among investigators, were attributed to an effort to protect his wife. The next step focused on Vito's mental state. Psychiatric evaluations were performed, which found no significant issues. The prosecution claimed that the concealed body, beheading, and the discarded bag far from the city pointed to premeditated murder, a well-planned crime. It was clear that the defendant had intentionally lured the victim into a trap. However, despite the strong arguments and evidence, Vito cleverly kept altering his story, apparently aiming to confuse the investigation. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, Vito tried to argue that the prosecution was biased against him. His lawyer suggested this was to make him a scapegoat and resolve the case quickly. The accused also mentioned having amnesia, which he said prevented him from remembering the days surrounding Marilena's murder. He ultimately confessed to hearing voices of demons that had tormented him for years, leading him to kill Marilena. However, these claims were disproven through investigations, and multiple witnesses stated they had never seen him exhibit signs of mental illness. Throughout the investigation, Vito remained calm and did not show signs of significant stress, which is uncommon for someone with mental health issues. The only medical condition identified in him was epilepsy, but he experienced seizures very rarely. Even if they happen more frequently, aggressive behavior is not typical for those with epilepsy. Detectives were intrigued by Vito's desperate attempts to shift the focus away from his wife. From the start, she appeared to be a potential accomplice in the murder. Investigators viewed her as more dominant and assertive than Vito, leading them to suspect she might have been the mastermind behind the crime. As they dug deeper, they uncovered more compelling information. Marilena was not the only woman deceived by Vito. He frequently borrowed large amounts of money from relatives, friends, and colleagues, ranging from 30,000 to 100,000 euros, to finance the construction of his house. This project became an obsession for both Vito and his wife, who had long dreamed of building a grand villa. To achieve their goal, they took on significant debts and loans, often borrowing again just to make payments and delay the associated issues of non-payment. By the time Marilena was murdered, they were under immense pressure from creditors. It is likely that everyone who lent them money was in danger, just as Marilena was. Due to the extensive examinations needed for a thorough investigation of the deceased's body, the burial did not take place until 10 months after the body was found. The funeral was held on June 1, 2018. By the end of January 2019, the trial of Vito began. From the start, his inconsistent statements, confessions, and retractions created a sense of distrust. The defense attorney struggled to effectively counter the prosecution's arguments, achieving only limited success in reducing the charges. Initially, it was thought that the murder involved torture, but a forensic expert later confirmed that the severed head and some of the body mutilations occurred after death. On January 24, 2019, Vito, who is 66 years old, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He appealed the verdict, but his appeal was rejected. Investigations into his wife's possible involvement in Marilena's death are still ongoing. On November 21, 2017, Vito was attacked in prison by his cellmate. His cellmate used a metal plate and a makeshift weapon during the assault. Vito reported that he had tried to stop all communication with his cellmate, who had made clear abuse advances that escalated into harassment. When Vito threatened to report his cellmate's behavior, he was attacked. While in prison, Vito continually expressed his dissatisfaction with the justice system, insisting on his innocence and asking for safety from his hostile cellmate. Despite his requests, he was sent back to prison after receiving treatment. On Sunday, November 29, 2020, he was found dead in the prison toilet. In his hand was a note that powerfully criticized the Italian law enforcement. He died after swallowing a garbage bag, which obstructed his airway and led to suffocation. Many suspect that he did not take his own life and that the incident was planned by his cellmate. The story of Meredith Lynn Sullivan Chapman, 33, captured national attention and was one of the most talked about cases of 2018. Born on January 31, 1985, in Newark, Delaware. Meredith was the youngest of 3 children in the Sullivan family. She was raised in a loving environment, supported by her older brother, Thomas, and sister, Jessica, cherished her. The Sullivan family was financially stable, and her parents ensured that their children received an excellent education while also encouraging them to pursue their personal interests and talents. However, everything changed for Meredith when she was in middle school, as her parents decided to divorce. Fortunately, the separation was friendly, with no significant arguments or legal battles, and both parents continued to be actively involved in their children's lives. Although Meredith found the divorce emotionally challenging, she always felt cared for and loved. Meredith was a kind, outgoing person who easily made friends. Her cheerful and engaging personality made her popular among her peers. From a young age, she excelled in school, learning came easily to her. She was curious, quick to grasp new concepts, and always willing to take the lead. In addition to her academic success, she had a strong passion for painting and was also very active in sports. During high school, she focused on cheerleading, eventually became the team captain. Even as a teenager, Meredith displayed determination and confidence, working hard to achieve her goals. Despite her drive, she treated others with fairness and respect, earning the admiration of both her classmates and teachers. After graduating from high school, Meredith began her studies at the University of Delaware, focusing on corporate communications and social sciences. She quickly adjusted to college life, excelled academically, and received a merit-based scholarship. Meredith stayed active in cheerleading, even giving presentations on it. Additionally, she participated in tennis, dance, and theater productions at the university. In her junior year, she secured an internship at a radio station in Philadelphia, where she managed the station's social media. This experience aligned perfectly with her career goals and deepened her passion for communications. Meredith joined an elite student organization, taking on a significant role that helped her build connections for her future career. For her senior project, she created a documentary about Joe Biden, which received notable recognition, including a nomination for a regional Emmy Award. This success opened opportunities for her in the media and communications field. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in 2007, Meredith worked on Capitol Hill as communications manager for U.S. Congressman Mike Castle and ran a winning campaign for former Delaware State Treasurer Chip Flowers. Her ambition and strong work ethic enabled her to excel in fast-paced environments, and she consistently pursued opportunities for intellectual growth. While in college, Meredith met a slightly older young man named Luke Chapman, who was also a graduate of the University of Delaware. They quickly formed a connection and began dating. Meredith and Luke shared many similarities. Both were intelligent, ambitious, and highly motivated. Luke, like Meredith, aimed for a career in public service, eventually became a member of the New York City Council. For a period, their professional journeys aligned. They both achieved significant accomplishments in their fields. Meredith and Luke had a good income and, shortly after their wedding, bought a large home in a quiet and upscale neighborhood in Fairfield Crest. They chose to delay starting a family to concentrate on their careers in politics. They also adopted a golden retriever named Indy, whom they cared for with the same dedication that others might show to a child. After several years, Meredith changed her career significantly. She left the field of politics to pursue a career in education. She obtained a master's degree in education and returned to the University of Delaware, her former school, where she began teaching public relations and digital marketing courses. She created strategies for social media engagement and researched new communication methods. In addition to teaching, she participated in various university committees. In 2013, Meredith took on the role of marketing director while still lecturing and publishing academic work. Her colleagues and students held her in high regard, praising her intelligence, professionalism, and unwavering dedication. Luke's career was progressing well. He dedicated long hours to work and took his responsibilities seriously. Over time, he and Meredith became deeply focused on their personal ambitions, resulting in them being home together less and less often. As a result, a noticeable distance formed between them. Although they appeared to have a perfect relationship on the outside, the connection between them had faded. Conversations about starting a family had stopped, and their marriage felt more like a formality than a true partnership. However, neither of them rushed to end the relationship, as their living arrangement was functioning adequately. They cohabited more like roommates than spouses, managing their own finances and daily routines separately. There were no fights or confrontations. In public, they projected an image of happiness. No one in their social circle knew what was really happening behind closed doors. In 2016, Meredith chose to re-enter politics, this time as a candidate rather than an assistant or staff member. Driven and ambitious, she launched her campaign to challenge the current senator for Delaware's 8th District, David Soccola. Her campaign gained momentum, and she had a good chance of winning. Ultimately, she lost by a narrow margin of less than 5%. After the election, Meredith returned to her career in education and focused on advancing her academic work. By 2017, she decided to hire an assistant, specifically a creative director, to oversee marketing efforts. She posted the job online and received numerous applications. Meredith personally interviewed each candidate, but one, a 49-year-old named Mark Gerardo, particularly impressed her. He met all the qualifications for the role in terms of experience and skills. During the interview, he made a positive impression and agreed to start working immediately. At that time, Mark was living in North Carolina but was ready to move for the position. He had been married to Jennifer Gerardo, but she stayed behind initially to sell their home and finish other obligations before relocating to join him. Mark proved to be a thoughtful, intelligent, and well-educated person with a strong background in marketing. He exceeded expectations right from the start. He quickly built a good working relationship with his new supervisor, and they found common interests almost immediately. Mark was 16 years older than his young boss. At that time, Meredith had grown emotionally distant from the husband she had been with for nearly 10 years, as both were heavily focused on their careers. Mark's situation was more complex. He had been married for almost 25 years and had remained committed to his wife during that time. As co-workers, they developed a close bond. Their teamwork was seamless, and they had a silent understanding of each other. Mark was dependable, efficient, and skilled. However, beneath their professional connection, a deeper relationship was beginning to form, unnoticed by others. For Meredith, Mark became more than just a trusted colleague. She felt comfortable sharing her personal thoughts and feelings with him, which meant a lot to her. In her busy pursuit of success, she had little time for friends, family, or meaningful conversations. Even her husband felt more like a stranger than a partner. But with Mark, she felt calm, safe, and truly understood. She eventually stopped resisting and invited him to spend time together outside of work. Just 2 weeks after Mark moved to Newark, Meredith suggested they meet after work at a local bar to relax. She wanted to have a conversation in a more casual setting. That evening, Mark opened up to her and, for the first time, shared his story. Mark Gerardo was born in 1968. His parents were strict and deeply religious, enforcing high standards of obedience and discipline in their large family. From an early age, Mark understood the importance of hard work and performed well in school. When Mark was 18, he met Jennifer, who was 16 and working as a waitress at a fast food restaurant. He often visited the restaurant, captivated by the girl behind the counter, but he never mustered the courage to talk to her or share his feelings. Jennifer and her family eventually moved to a nearby town, causing her to lose touch with Mark for several years. In 1990, they met again at a local shopping center where Jennifer worked as a sales associate. Mark was excited to see her but felt too shy to make a move. Noticing this, Jennifer took the initiative and asked him out first. Their relationship quickly grew deeper, and in 1992, Mark proposed. Jennifer happily accepted, and less than a year later, they got married. Mark and Jennifer, newly married, settled in Indianapolis, Indiana, where they purchased a home together. At this point, Mark had completed his degree in graphic design and landed a well-paying job in that field. Jennifer was successful as a real estate agent, so they enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. Although they never had children, they adopted 3 dogs that they treated as part of their family. To their friends, neighbors, and relatives, Mark and Jennifer appeared to be a perfect couple, deeply in love and genuinely happy. They rarely had public disagreements. Their home was known for its peaceful atmosphere. Both were strong, independent individuals with stable incomes and lives. By the mid-2000s, after being together for over 20 years, the Gerardos faced difficulties. Mark experienced the loss of both his parents in a short time, while Jennifer, who had put a lot of effort into starting her own business, encountered significant financial troubles. Overwhelmed by emotional and financial stress, they decided to make a big change in their lives. They sold their house and moved to the peaceful town of Greenville, South Carolina. Mark quickly secured a stable job in marketing, while Jennifer opted to focus on family life as she looked for the right job opportunity. During this time, they traveled a lot and spent quality time together. The emotional distance that had developed between them began to disappear. Their relationship rekindled, and for a year and a half, they experienced what felt like a second honeymoon. In 2017, Mark started looking for new job opportunities to find a more fulfilling role with better pay. During his search, he found a job posting from Meredith. The couple was not afraid of the move. Mark went ahead first because the job needed him to start right away, while Jennifer stayed behind to sell their house and take care of local affairs. She planned to join him in Newark about a month later. That evening, Mark shared his story with Meredith, who listened carefully. In return, she talked about her own life, including her career successes and the slow deterioration of her marriage. As they talked, they connected on a deeper level, feeling as if they had known each other for years. They built a strong sense of trust and stayed at the bar until late at night. Afterward, they went back to Mark's apartment and spent the night together. This marked the beginning of a private relationship that they kept hidden from others. They continued to see each other secretly, often meeting at Mark's place while his wife was out of state. For Meredith, starting a romance with Mark didn't pose any real challenges. Her marriage to Luke had long become a mere formality. For Mark, the situation was much more complicated. First, he had never cheated in his 25 years of marriage. Second, he found himself unexpectedly attracted to Meredith, who was much younger than him. Third, he knew that Meredith was still legally married, just like he was. Despite these issues, Mark and Meredith's relationship continued even after Jennifer moved to Newark. From the beginning, Jennifer felt that something was off. She sensed that another woman had been in their new home, but she chose not to confront her husband right away. Instead, she decided to gather information to confirm her suspicions. Mark often worked late and became more distant from his family. When Jennifer asked him about it, he attributed his behavior to tiredness and a heavy workload. Their physical closeness had almost vanished. This continued for several months until Jennifer confronted him about the possibility of infidelity. Mark denied it. Although he attempted to end his affair with Meredith, their bond was too strong, and after a short break, they resumed their secret meetings. Meredith had made a decision. After discussing it with her husband, Luke, they agreed to proceed with a peaceful divorce. On February 14, 2018, Valentine's Day, Jennifer confronted Mark. She revealed that she was aware of his affair with his boss. She had hired a private investigator who followed Mark, took compromising photos, and recorded the locations where he met Meredith. With this evidence, Mark had no escape. However, he tried to justify his actions, assuring Jennifer that he would end the affair to save their marriage. Unfortunately, this promise was short-lived, as he continued his relationship with Meredith, but now with more caution. Jennifer didn't trust Mark, so she decided to keep a close watch on him. She placed a GPS device in his car and installed monitoring software on his phone and computer. She sewed listening devices into Mark's clothes to secretly record his conversations when they were apart. One of those recordings captured Jennifer's growing insecurity. The situation escalated when Mark discovered the tracking device. Realizing he could no longer put off an important decision, he told Jennifer that he had fallen in love with Meredith, his boss, and wanted to be with her. He also announced his plans to file for divorce. This news was a severe shock for Jennifer, who was 47 at the time. After nearly 25 years of marriage, her husband was leaving her for a younger woman. To make things worse, they had recently moved to a new city, and Jennifer had not yet found a job. This left her feeling financially unstable, emotionally unsupported, and lost. Her life felt like it was falling apart, and she was struggling to cope. By early March 2018, Meredith completed her divorce from Luke and was no longer tied to any commitments. She anticipated that Mark would also finalize his divorce soon, but his situation was more complicated. Due to specific legal requirements in their new state, Mark needed to establish residency before he could file for divorce, and they had only recently moved. At the same time, Meredith resigned from her job at the University of Delaware. She was about to start a new role as Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Villanova University, one of Pennsylvania's top institutions. Additionally, she received an offer for a leadership position at Ruffalo Noel Levitz, a prominent consulting firm specializing in higher education strategy. On April 5th, Meredith moved into her new home in Radnor Township, Pennsylvania. She was gradually getting settled, and about a week later, Mark joined her. He had also left his previous job and started a new role at Villanova University as Meredith's personal assistant. It felt like a fresh start for the couple, a promising new chapter. They just needed to complete a few final steps to fully embrace this new beginning, but they were unaware that a deadly threat was already approaching. Hurt and betrayed, Jen Eyre began plotting a disturbing act of revenge. On April 23, 2018, Mark and Meredith had plans to meet at a local restaurant to celebrate a fresh start. Before heading to the restaurant, Meredith stopped by her house to change clothes while Mark ordered their meal and waited for her. As time went by, Meredith didn't arrive, and she wasn't answering her phone, making Mark uneasy. Suddenly, he received a series of alarming messages from Jen Eyre, filled with anger and resentment. She wished him endless misery, and then he received a photo that shocked him. It was a picture of Meredith's kitchen. In a panic, Mark abandoned everything and rushed to Meredith's house. When he arrived, he saw her car parked in the driveway. A black Chevrolet was also parked down the street, but Mark didn't pay much attention to it at the time. The lights were on inside the house, and the front door was unlocked. However, as soon as he stepped inside, he was met with silence. He went directly to the kitchen, was horrified to find Meredith, 33, and Jen Eyre, 48, lying on the floor in large pools of blood. It was too late for them, both died from gunshot wounds. Mark screamed and rushed outside. His cries alarmed the nearby neighbors, who quickly called for emergency services. Initially, investigators thought Mark might have been involved in the incident due to his emotional struggles and complicated relationship with Jen Eyre. However, this theory was quickly dismissed. The weapon was discovered under Jen Eyre's body and contained only her fingerprints. Authorities concluded that the act was premeditated, followed by her own self-harm. Before the incident, Jen Eyre had sent several emails to a close friend expressing her intentions to do something drastic. Later evidence showed she had spent around 2 weeks preparing for this. She bought a firearm, rented a car, and collected items for a disguise. Jen Eyre also managed to find Meredith's new address on her own. For an entire week, she observed the couple's activities. Neighbors reported seeing a woman in a wig driving a black Chevrolet and lingering in the area, but she did not seem threatening. Mark also remembered noticing the car but thought it belonged to someone from the neighborhood. Jen Eyre had closely observed Meredith's routine and was aware of when they typically returned home. On the day of the incident, she arrived early, parked her car a few blocks away, and approached their house. She gained entry by breaking a window in the backyard and quietly entered. It is believed her intention was to confront, kill both Mark and Meredith before taking her own life. However, things did not go as planned. Meredith came home alone. Investigators later discovered that Meredith had taken out a life insurance policy valued at $500,000 about a year and a half prior, naming her ex-husband, Luke, as the beneficiary. After the divorce, this designation had not been changed. As a result, Luke Chapman became a person of interest as authorities looked into possible indirect involvement in the case. However, this theory was ultimately ruled out due to insufficient evidence. The investigation took only a few days, and authorities quickly closed the case, concluding that the responsible person was deceased, that there were no other suspects. Mark was exonerated but faced significant public and media scrutiny. Rather than withdrawing, he decided to speak out, giving interviews and appearing on talk shows to discuss the events in detail. A year later, Mark released a memoir detailing his relationships with both women and the circumstances surrounding the tragic incident. He expressed how deeply the experience affected him, noting that he never expected the woman he had been with for nearly 25 years could do something so devastating. While the book became a bestseller and was generally well received, public opinion was mixed. Some critics accused him of exploiting the situation and profiting from the tragedy by sharing his personal story. Meredith's family sued Luke after he refused to return the life insurance money he received after her death. The court ruled in his favor, ordering him to return only 10% of the total amount to her family, as the judge found no malicious intent on his part. Meredith had not expected to die and had not updated her policy before her passing. After she died, her remains were cremated, and her urn was given to her parents. Jennifer Gerardo was buried in her hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Many still believe that Mark was also meant to be a victim that night but narrowly escaped a tragic fate. Teenage years can be a particularly vulnerable time in a person's life. During this period, individuals transition from childhood to adulthood. They might appear innocent and carefree, but they often hold on to secrets, maybe out of fear or embarrassment. Sometimes, not feeling able to share their struggles with a trusted parent or loved one can lead to serious consequences. The case of Justice Garrett, who was only 16 when her life was tragically cut short in 2018, has shocked Florida. For her mother, it was a heartbreaking realization. She had not recognized or understood the struggles her daughter was facing. Justice Marie Garrett was born on March 23, 2002, and is the eldest daughter of Danielle Pratt and Stanley Garrett. Justice spent most of her childhood and teenage years in New Smyrna Beach, a small town in Volusia County, Florida. In 2016, her parents divorced. Justice lived with their mother. A year later, Danielle started dating Robert Nixon Kern Jr. By the fall of 2017, Danielle moved with her daughters to Sorrento, Florida, a tiny rural town with a population of just over 1,000. They settled into Robert's house. Justice faced significant challenges after moving and struggled to adjust to her new surroundings. She missed her close friends who stayed in New Smyrna Beach, felt the difficulty of transferring schools in the middle of the academic year, and was unhappy with her new home and her mother's partner. Despite her frustrations, Justice remained respectful, tried not to cause any issues. Known for her friendly and humorous personality, she quickly made friends at her new school, especially forming a strong bond with a classmate. The two girls became nearly inseparable, with Justice often staying at her classmate's house, and they even referred to each other as sisters on social media. On Friday, April 13, 2018, Justice overslept and missed her school bus. In her rush to get ready for class, she skipped breakfast. That day, her younger sister, Devon, was ill and stayed home, while their mother was preparing to take Devon to the hospital. Justice chose to take a public bus to school, which was only a few stops away. She packed her backpack, said goodbye to her mother, and left the house. That was the last time anyone saw Justice alive. When Justice didn't return home from school at the expected time, her mother, Danielle, wasn't worried. She thought Justice had gone to her friend's house, which she often did after class. When Justice had missed school on Friday, and her phone had been off for almost 2 days, Danielle felt a surge of panic. After trying several times to reach her daughter without success, she hurried to the local police station to report her missing. The search for Justice began right away. When the officers found out that Justice had only moved to the area 6 months ago, they thought she might have gone back to her old town to visit friends for the weekend. Authorities believe that teenagers sometimes leave home suddenly, either in rebellion or for other reasons, and they thought Justice would likely return soon. However, Danielle firmly believed that her daughter wouldn't have left so far without telling her first. The initial step was to identify Justice's friends and find out if she had a boyfriend, any recent conflicts, or other relevant information that could clarify the circumstances of her disappearance. Justice left home without any money, and all of her personal items were still there. Her phone lost signal shortly after she departed for school. Her social media accounts showed no activity since late Thursday night, and she didn't reply to any calls or messages. None of her friends knew her whereabouts, as she hadn't been in touch with anyone. Justice was not drinking alcohol or using banned substance. She was not in a relationship and had never had serious romantic involvement. Justice surrounded herself with positive influences, had no conflicts with others, and had a clean legal record. Teachers at her school spoke highly of her. Her classmates viewed her as kind, compassionate, and sweet. The police quickly checked all local crime reports, incidents, and traffic accidents throughout the area. They considered the possibility that she might have been involved in an accident and was unable to communicate. However, there were no records of her being involved in any such events. Using data from her phone, investigators were able to track her movements on the morning she disappeared. Around 7:30 a.m., Justice left her home and began walking toward the school. Approximately 15 minutes later, her movements became unusual. She stopped for a moment and then abruptly changed direction. Shortly afterward, her phone was turned off. Justice's disappearance sparked rumors and speculation throughout the small, quiet town, where little ever happened. Any incident quickly became the center of attention, spreading through gossip and often embellished with falsehoods. On April 17th, for days after Justice went missing, a man alerted the police about a disturbing discovery he made in a wooded area outside of town. An experienced runner, he often jogged along a secluded trail that passed through a park and into the forest. That morning, while exploring the woods, he was struck by a strong, foul smell that seemed like decay. At first, he believed it was just the remains of a dead animal and thought about reporting it for removal. However, his curiosity led him to investigate the smell further. He stepped off the trail and walked approximately 15 feet into the underbrush, where he found a shocking sight: a severely decomposed human body, unrecognizable in appearance. Based on the long hair and pieces of clothing, it looked like a young woman. Her pants were pulled down to her ankles, her shirt and bra were pulled up around her neck, and her hoodie was tied tightly around her head. He quickly called the police and waited on the trail to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. When the officers arrived, they carefully examined the area and the remains. It was evident that this was a violent crime scene and the victim was a young woman. Her clothes were torn and her undergarments were missing, suggesting the crime was both abuse and aggressive. There were visible bite marks on her legs, probably from wild animals, but the most severe injuries were inflicted by a corrosive chemical. This substance had damaged her face down to the bone and had also been poured on her chest, lower abdomen, and private areas. It was clear that the perpetrator intended to disfigure the victim and remove any DNA evidence, which was unfortunately successful. From the beginning, investigators believed that the body discovered in the woods was that of Justice, who reported missing a few days earlier. However, due to significant chemical damage and decomposition, DNA testing was necessary for confirmation. Unfortunately, the Garrett family's fears were confirmed: Justice had been found dead. Her remains were located approximately 30 minutes away from her hometown. Evidence indicated that she had endured severe beating prior to her death, as her nose, cheekbone, and several ribs were fractured. Because of the advanced decomposition, the exact cause of death could not be clearly identified, but it was thought to be due to mechanical asphyxiation. The man who found the remains provided important information to the police during his interview. He shared that he often jogged along the same path every other day. 2 days before discovering the body, he had seen a suspicious man coming out of the woods near where Justice's remains were later located. Although the witness could not give a detailed description because he only saw the man briefly from behind and from a distance, he described him as a short, stocky white male dressed in jeans and a black hoodie. The man quickly left when he realized someone else was nearby and vanished behind the trees. At the time, the runner found the encounter strange but didn't think much of it. There was no noticeable smell of decay that day, so he pushed the incident from his mind. However, after he found the remains 2 days later, he remembered the unusual man on the trail and reported it to the authorities. Detectives quickly suspected that the unknown person in the woods could be the criminal behind the crime. They thought he might have returned to the scene to hide evidence. Experts identified the chemical used on the body as chlorine bleach. This, combined with the area's humid climate, sped up decomposition and made the remains unrecognizable. The jogger was eliminated as a suspect after passing a lie detector test and giving a strong alibi for the day Justice went missing. Justice's mother stated that her daughter intended to take a public bus to school that morning. However, security camera footage showed that Justice never arrived at the bus stop. A neighbor reported seeing Justice get into a car belonging to her stepfather, Robert. This information shifted the investigation's focus, prompting detectives to question Justice's parents again to understand why they hadn't been honest. Danielle, Justice's mother, quickly admitted that her partner, Robert, had recently lost his driver's license temporarily. Since Justice was running late that morning, he decided to give her a ride. Danielle had kept this information secret to avoid causing issues for Robert. At the time of the first interview, Justice's body has not been found yet, she thought Justice was still alive and would return home soon. Detectives quickly requested surveillance footage from cameras near the school to verify Robert's account. However, the recordings showed that Robert had neither dropped Justice off at school nor anywhere close by. His car was not seen on any cameras along the route to the school, raising questions about where they had gone. This indicated that Robert was likely the last person to see Justice alive. When questioned again, Robert confessed that he had driven Justice that morning despite having a suspended license. He explained that she had begged him not to take her to school but to the nearby town, where she allegedly had a meeting with a secret boyfriend. Robert claimed he did not know the name of this person and initially refused to take her, but eventually relented to her requests in an effort to improve their strained relationship. Justice had asked him not to tell her mother about this trip, assuring him she would return on her own later that day. She also said that since it was Friday, she planned to spend the night at a friend's house. Robert agreed, not seeing anything unusual or concerning about the situation. This new information brought a potential suspect into the investigation, a secret boyfriend. Investigators needed to find and identify him quickly, as he could either be connected to Justice's disappearance or, at the very least, might be the last person to have seen her alive. Law enforcement started their investigation by examining Justice's contacts and social media activity since her phone was still missing. They confiscated her laptop, which led to even more questions. Justice had several accounts on different social media platforms, where she regularly communicated with friends from both her real life and the online world, but no signs of romantic relationships or a boyfriend were found. One particular account, however, appeared strange and suspicious. Investigators concentrated on this profile to identify its owner and determine if it was linked to Justice's disappearance. A young man named Kevin had been increasingly interested in Justice Garrett over the past few months. He messaged her every day, liked her posts, and complimented her photos. However, Justice appeared uninterested. She seldom replied, often ignored his messages, and showed no intention of keeping in touch. Justice's friends later revealed that she had talked about a persistent admirer who frequently messaged her on social media, but she found him more bothersome than charming. Kevin's profile indicated that he was 2 years older than Justice and lived in the same town. The profile included only a few pictures of an athletic and attractive young man, but none of Justice's friends or family had ever met him in real life. Eventually, it was uncovered that the account was fake, with the photos taken from the internet. Experts promptly accessed the account and traced its creation. The investigation showed that the account didn't belong to a teenager but was linked to an adult man named Robert. Justice's stepfather was brought in for questioning. Detectives wanted to know why he had created a fake account to communicate with his stepdaughter and why he hadn't mentioned it before. Robert seemed taken aback that investigators had discovered his link to the account, but he quickly regained his composure and provided an explanation. He stated that he had created the account to help boost Justice's self-esteem, suggesting that as the new girl in town and at school, she might enjoy getting compliments from a seemingly attractive young man. Justice was new to the area, but she quickly fit into her school and made many friends. Recently, however, her close friends noticed changes in her behavior. The cheerful and carefree teenager became more tense and nervous. Although she didn't share the reasons for this change, she often stayed at her best friend's house. Justice spent so much time there that it felt like she had moved in, yet she never told her best friend what was bothering her. Her best friend observed that Justice's stepfather came by her house several times to pick Justice's up. Each time, Justice appeared anxious, tried to avoid going with him. She would call her mother, pleading to stay a few more nights at her friend's and promising to finish her chores, focus on schoolwork in return. Danielle typically agreed to her requests. Robert and Justice reportedly had a difficult relationship from the beginning, a fact known to her friends. However, Justice never claimed that he was aggressive or acted inappropriately, and no one around her, including her mother, had witnessed anything concerning in Robert's behavior towards his stepdaughter. As doubts about him grew, Robert became as the primary suspect in the investigation into Justice's tragic death. Police took him into custody for more questioning while also investigating his background and lifestyle. Robert, 43 years old, had a troubled past with the law, including convictions for burglary, banned substance possession, and violent incidents. His criminal record made it very difficult for him to find stable employment, so he sometimes worked illegally as a carpenter at a local sawmill, taking on odd jobs to get by. Detectives were now trying to piece together Robert's troubled history, his behavior towards justice, and the events surrounding a horrific crime. Robert had hidden his past from everyone, including Danielle, who was unaware that she was living with someone who had a criminal background. When investigators uncovered the truth about him, Danielle was shocked and finally spoke out. She revealed that Robert had offered to drive Justice to school that day, even though Justice had expressed his reluctance. When Justice did not come home, Danielle became worried. However, Robert reassured her that Justice was staying overnight at her best friend's house. He even told her not to call the police or contact her friend. Investigators looked into Robert's devices and found that in the months before Justice disappeared, he had repeatedly searched online for information about substances that could make a person unconscious or immobile. He had also explored ways to buy such substances on the dark web and seemed to have successfully made a purchase. Robert didn't stop there. He looked into ways to remove DNA evidence from a body, using common household items like bleach and disinfectants. He even examined satellite images of wooded areas near DeLand, where Justice's body was ultimately discovered. It was apparent that Robert had been carefully planning his crime for months, intending to hide the body and eliminate all evidence. His motive was increasingly clear. He had developed an unhealthy obsession with justice and believed that the only way to fulfill his disturbing desires was through violence. To evade the legal repercussions for his actions, he resolved to kill her. Investigators cleared up their suspicions about Robert's involvement by examining the geolocation data from his phone on that day. He drove away from their home with Justice toward her school, but then suddenly changed direction and stopped in a remote area. At this point, it's believed that Robert may have used a chemical, possibly chloroform, to incapacitate Justice. He then turned off Justice's phone. His vehicle was monitored as it traveled to the location where it remained for about an hour. This time frame would have provided him enough opportunity to assault Justice, physically harm her, strangle her, and hide her body in the woods. From 8:12 a.m. to 9:17 a.m., Robert's phone remained in the area where Justice's body was eventually found. On that day, he carried a small bottle of a chlorine-based substance, which he poured over her face and other areas to eliminate possible evidence. However, Robert became anxious, worrying that he might have left traces behind. 2 days later, he came back to the scene with a large container of bleach, poured it over Justice's head, chest, and lower body in a final effort to destroy any evidence that could connect him to the crime. That morning, the attacker revisited the crime scene and was seen by a jogger. The jogger later found Justice's body and reported it to the police. Kern's alibi quickly unraveled. Although he worked unofficially at a local sawmill, he had asked 2 co-workers to falsely claim he was on time that day, when in fact he was almost 2 hours late. When questioned further, both co-workers admitted the truth after being warned they could face charges for lying and hiding evidence in a violent crime. Robert denied all the charges, but the evidence against him was overwhelming, leading to a trial. Witnesses described Justice as living in fear during the final months of her life, often avoiding her home. Despite her struggles, she never expressed her fears, not even to her mother. Danielle, caught up in her love for her new partner, didn't recognize the danger and never asked Robert about his past. Prosecutors thoroughly disproved Robert's statements, showing he had carefully planned the crime with the intent to kill Justice. Forensic evidence, such as moss and soil samples from the location where Justice's body was found, matched particles found on his car mats, strengthening the connection to the crime scene. However, allegations of abuse assault could not be definitively proven because the DNA evidence and tissue samples had been destroyed by a corrosive chemical that he used, which eroded the victim's remains. In August 2022, almost 2.5 years after the crime, Robert Nixon Kern Jr. was found guilty of premeditated violent murder. He received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole, meaning he will never be released. The tragic murder of 16-year-old Justice Garrett on April 13, 2018, in Sorrento, Florida, exposed the hidden dangers of teenage vulnerability. Justice's silent struggles, unnoticed by her mother, Danielle, underscore the critical need for open communication and vigilance to protect teens from unseen threats, ensuring her loss inspires lasting change. In the Italian province of Bergamo, the municipality of Cologno al Sirios has around 10,000 residents. Femicides are a significant concern here, with many women being harmed by their former or current partners. In 2019, Zinaida Solinari, a 36-year-old woman originally from a small village in Moldova, was living in Cologno al Sirios. She had resided in Italy for nearly 15 years and had made some progress toward achieving her dreams. Like many young women who leave their home countries in search of a better life, Zinaida aimed to establish herself abroad. She arrived in Italy in 2004 at the age of 21, hoping to find employment and eventually a husband to create a happy life. Right after moving to Bergamo, Zinaida began her new life and work. She was a vibrant and attractive young woman who received a lot of attention from men, but she was not looking for a short-term fling. She wanted to find a husband. A few years later, she met a man named Maurizio Quattrochi, who was 11 years older than her. He appeared trustworthy and kind. She was immediately drawn to him. It's important to mention that Zinaida lived with her daughter, whom she had at the age of 16. At the time of their move, her daughter was 5 years old. Maurizio welcomed her daughter as if she were his own and later adopted her. Zinaida hadn't yet made many friends in Bergamo. From the start, Maurizio treated her and her daughter beautifully, offering a sense of security that won Zinaida over. They began a relationship that quickly became serious. Maurizio was a painter and bricklayer with a troubled past that included several criminal offenses, which he chose not to share with Zinaida, a fact she later discovered. He had been convicted multiple times for buying stolen property and had several instances of driving under the influence. Despite this history, he treated Zinaida and her daughter with great care. In late 2004, they married. The following year they welcomed their first daughter, with a second daughter arriving 4 years later. Maurizio was dedicated to his family, but he had a fiery temperament. Zinaida affectionately called him a hot Italian, believing it to be part of his charm. She worked to smooth over any tensions. For many years, their relationship appeared loving and understanding. However, beneath the surface, there were troubling issues. Zinaida's family soon learned about Mauricio's bad temper. He was impulsive and aggressive. His jealousy began to strain their relationship, particularly after Zinaida took a job as a waitress at a popular restaurant in mid-2019. Maurizio was unhappy with her job because many men frequented the restaurant, and his financial struggles heightened his jealousy. Especially as Zinaida's salary allowed her more independence, made her the family's primary earner. At the restaurant, Zinaida met a woman who was also from Eastern Europe. They discovered they had a lot in common. Her colleagues soon noticed the tension between Zinaida and her husband, Maurizio. During Zinaida's first week at her new job, Maurizio came to the restaurant because she hadn't answered his calls. He raised his voice at her, and her colleague could see that Zinaida flinched at every loud sound, revealing her fear of her husband. After that incident, Zinaida shared with her colleague that Maurizio was jealous, upset because she had become more independent and had slipped out of his control. Despite this, Zinaida was determined to stand her ground, not give in to his demands, so she continued working at the restaurant, hoping that her husband would eventually adjust and stop pressuring her. The situation was worsening, seemed to be getting out of control. Her colleague noticed that after several months of working at the restaurant, Zinaida had lost a significant amount of weight and appeared very anxious, which was quite concerning. Zinaida usually dealt with her problems on her own, seldom talked about her life. However, it was clear that her marriage was failing. After 13 years, Zinaida realized it was time for a change. She understood how dangerous her husband was after a fight that occurred just before the tragedy. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to respond. Around 2 a.m. on October 6, 2019, the city police received a report about a woman who had been injured. When officers arrived at Via Alberto de Giussano, it was too late to help her. She had already died. The woman was 36-year-old Zinaida Solinari. Police quickly interviewed her family and friends. Zina Ida was found in the courtyard of her sister Oksana Solinari's house, where she had been living recently. Oksana had moved to Italy after Zina Ida, and her life had been more settled since marrying Lucio Carlo Di Dio. Oksana informed the police about the difficulties Zina Ida faced in her marriage. She believed the event was a result of Mauricio's ongoing aggressive behavior. Just before the tragedy, Zina Ida had made the decision to leave her husband, believing it was her only option after a recent family conflict. In private, Zina Ida confided in Oksana that Maurizio had threatened her, saying if she tried to leave, he would kill her and then take his own life. From that point, Zina Ida understood that the man she thought was her protector could actually be a serious threat to her safety. She shared her experiences of aggression, physical abuse, and how she had to call the police after her last fight with Maurizio. At that time, Zina Ida had 3 children, but her husband was indifferent and consumed by jealousy. He was behaving violently, and it was only when the police arrived that he calmed down. Although Zina Ida chose not to file formal charges against him, she spoke to the police out of fear for her safety. She thought that moving out of the house was the best way to protect herself and her children. After leaving, she hoped Maurizio would eventually calm down so they could officially get divorced. However, Zina Ida did not recognize that the period when a woman tries to escape the control of an abusive partner is often the most dangerous time, both during the decision to separate and the act of leaving. Zina Ida opened up to several friends about her husband's frequent episodes of intense jealousy. She shared that he not only yelled at her but also physically assaulted her. However, when speaking with detectives, she did not mention the threats of violence. She minimized the severity of her situation, claiming that her husband had never physically harmed her until mid-2019, despite his aggressive demeanor and constant emotional pressure. Zina Ida believed she could manage her circumstances alone. Just 2 hours before she was murdered, a patrol of carabinieri drove by her sister's house. Oksana was aware that Maurizio was searching for his wife. He had come to visit her that evening and hadn't been seen since. Concerned for safety, Oksana called the police. The carabinieri checked the area but left without finding anything suspicious. Later that evening, Oksana's husband mentioned seeing a car that looked like Mauricio's parked in a dead end, but they could not locate its owner. If the police officers had been more vigilant, they might have noticed something amiss and potentially prevent the crime. Maurizio Quattrochi was 47 years old, had a history of a bad temper. Recently, he lost his job as a bricklayer, a position he had held for several years. This wasn't the first instance of him being fired. He was previously let go from his job as a cook at a pizzeria due to conflicts with management. Although Maurizio had always been aggressive, Zina Ida usually managed to calm him down. However, after losing his job, his anger intensified. He struggled with the pressure of not being able to support his family, which only added to his irritation, especially towards Zina Ida's accomplishments. On the evening of October 5th, he was waiting for Zina Ida to return home while intoxicated. Just days earlier, Zina Ida and her children had moved in with her sister, Oksana, seeking refuge without revealing her plans. She felt there were no other options for support and thought that staying with her sister would allow the children to continue going to their previous school. Zina Ida also underestimated the likelihood of Maurizio acting on his threats. She wanted to avoid causing additional stress for their children. The next day after Zina Ida moved out, Maurizio quickly found her at his relative's house. They had another uncomfortable conversation, but this time Zina Ida chose not to involve the police. She wanted to prevent anyone else from getting hurt and still hoped that Maurizio, with whom she had spent 13 years, would act rationally. Sadly, he had started to see her as an object, making rationality unlikely. Tragically, Zina Ida was found outside her sister's house with several stab wounds, some of which were life-threatening. The attacker had cut her throat and stabbed her in the chest, leading to severe blood loss. She died before the ambulance could reach her. At that moment, her 3 daughters were asleep just a few meters away from their mother. When the carabinieri arrived, Maurizio was already gone, having fled the scene of the crime. However, Zinaida's sister had important information about him. Oksana, who was close to her sister, knew details about Mauricio's job, his favorite hangouts, and his car. Her husband, Lucio noted that an old Peugeot 206 was parked in an alley and that car drove away in it right after the attack. Witnesses provided the police with the vehicle's license plate, allowing them to start the search for him immediately. The police first searched Mauricio's house but found no one there. They then checked his previous workplaces but found them empty as well. He had gone on the run, but there were only a few possible escape routes. The Carabinieri were pursuing the suspect and were closing in. However, they worried he might abandon his car and hide in the wilderness. The police monitored checkpoints and cameras along the potential escape paths. Maurizio was quickly located, and a large-scale operation was planned to capture him. They set up checkpoints on the road and stopped cars that matched his description. Despite this, Maurizio managed to briefly slip through the barrier. His escape lasted just under 16 hours. Eventually, a man matching his description was seen walking along the road, several hundred kilometers from the murder scene. Surprisingly, he hadn't traveled far from Oksana's house, as if he was unsure of what to do and was aimlessly wandering while trying to come up with a plan. He was stopped and arrested at the city entrance. The alleged criminal was taken to Treviglio station, charged with first-degree murder, and sent to prison in Bergamo. At this point, Maurizio claimed that Zenaida's death was accidental, insisting he never wanted to hurt his beloved wife. However, her sister, Oksana, reminded him of his earlier threats to kill Zenaida. Oksana was aware that Maurizio had long suspected Zenaida of cheating, frequently accusing her of having affairs with other men, even though there was no truth to those claims. She firmly believed that Zenaida had remained faithful in their marriage, but Maurizio was not convinced. The situation may have worsened due to Mauricio's job loss and Zenaida's newfound independence. She recognized that their family was struggling and that they needed money for basic necessities. Taking a job at a restaurant was her way of supporting herself, her husband, and their children. Unbeknownst to her, this decision stirred intense anger in Maurizio. Rather than being encouraging, he grew increasingly jealous and resentful. His behavior could have been exacerbated by the depression often linked to such issues, but this did not lessen his guilt. Mauricio's behavior was similar to stalking. Maurizio bombarded Zenaida with constant work calls, which severely affected her ability to perform her job. He insisted on constant contact, even asked for photos to prove where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Her employer noticed her frequent distractions and advised her to turn off her mobile phone, hoping this would alleviate the situation with her husband. Unfortunately, this only made things worse. Rather than stop his interference, Maurizio started arriving at the restaurant and causing dramatic scenes. Each time, his behavior became more concerning. All these incidents were verified by a friend of Zenaida, whom she met at the restaurant. Although Zenaida preferred not to complain, she shared with her sister that she was overwhelmed by ongoing scandals at home. After long days at work, she would return to face constant accusations of infidelity and jealousy-driven arguments. Trying to defend herself felt pointless. By the end of summer 2019, she experienced physical violence at home for the first time. Instead of addressing their problems and looking for a job, Maurizio turned to drinking, which led to conflicts, left her with bruises. After interviewing the suspect, detectives determined that jealousy was the motive behind this act of femicide. They investigated Mauricio's background to confirm the statements made by Zenaida's relatives and friends. He seemed to be a typical manipulator who was losing control over Zenaida. After losing his last job due to a conflict with his boss, he could only find odd jobs that didn't provide enough income to support the family. This situation led him to alcoholism and increasingly abusive behavior. In contrast, Zenaida was working as a waitress and occasionally as a hotel maid. She also earned extra income through modeling. It became clear that she no longer needed this relationship. From what was known, Maurizio spoke negatively about Zenaida's modeling career, convinced that it was linked to other men, leading him to believe that she was unfaithful. Although he could not find any evidence to support this, he was equally unable to convince his spouse otherwise. After the Carabinieri were first called due to a domestic dispute involving threats, they assessed Mauricio's behavior and advised Zenaida to move out. It was generally accepted that her refusal to file a complaint contributed to her death. Maurizio continued to assert that his attack was unintentional, claiming he simply wanted to talk to his wife and that she was the one who first exhibited aggression. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation contradicted these assertions. Zinaida had remained calm, diffusing all hostility, and consistently tried to avoid conflict. In contrast, everyone who knew Maurizio well described him as extraordinarily aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling. The fact that the Carabinieri could not find him during their patrol confirmed suspicions that he had set up an ambush and was in hiding. He possessed a kitchen knife, which became the weapon used in the murder. It could not have ended up in his hands by chance. He had taken it with him intentionally, having planned to confront Zinaida from the very beginning. According to the reconstruction of events, late on Saturday evening, Zinaida was returning home from a night shift at the restaurant. The last message she received from her loved ones was a warning. Around midnight, Oksana wished her sister a safe journey and advised her to be careful. When speaking to the police, Oksana expressed that she had a bad feeling, which is why she wrote this message to Zinaida. She had no idea that the future killer was already waiting for his victim outside the house. Zinaida barely managed to stop near the gate of Oksana's house and got out of her car. She had walked only 3 meters when Maurizio attacked her with a kitchen knife, striking her several times with force. However, Zinaida did not lose consciousness. Instead, she began to scream. This noise awakened her neighbors and her sister, who called for help. Unfortunately, the criminal had enough time to inflict a fatal wound on his victim. Even after the neighbors raised a ruckus, he continued the attack, unable to control the anger fueled by jealousy. Realizing what had happened, Maurizio jumped into his car and began to flee. However, this reckless escape was ill-conceived, as there was nowhere for him to hide. The day of Zinaida Solinari's funeral was declared a day of mourning in the city. This tragic news shocked not only the numerous members of the city's Moldovan community but also all other residents. Flags were lowered, and many local establishments were closed. A memorial service was held, attended by an Orthodox priest from Bergamo. Hundreds of concerned citizens came to the church for the vigil, all appalled by the tragic fate of this kind and beautiful woman. White flowers lay on the white coffin, and red ribbons, a symbol of the fight against femicide, were tied at the feet of local residents. Red roses were placed around a fountain in the main square, and candles were lit. Meanwhile, the suspect remained defiant. His story changed several times, resulting in no one believing him anymore. During another interrogation, Maurizio claimed that the meeting was simply to communicate with his wife. After consuming a considerable amount of alcohol, he insisted that he felt a surge of jealousy, which had become increasingly frequent. Throughout the day, he had contacted his wife. Even if Maurizio genuinely wanted to know what his wife was doing that evening, the response did not satisfy him. He attacked her while checking her mobile phone. The Carabinieri discovered that earlier that evening, at about 6 p.m., Oksana had informed her that Maurizio had come to her house looking to see his children. Naturally, Zinaida refused, as she immediately noticed that he was drunk. She told him he could only see his daughters the next day when he had sobered up. This likely intensified Mauricio's jealousy, suggesting that he may have been lying in wait near the house for several hours before attacking his victim. Initially, Maurizio insisted that it was all an accident, then claimed he did not remember anything. His final explanation was that he did not want to kill Zinaida but was unable to control himself due to jealousy. His lies did not clarify whether he had truly been waiting there all that time with a knife or if he had left and returned after the Carabinieri had checked the area. Maurizio maintained that he could not recall anything because of the alcohol he had consumed and even denied bringing a knife with him, claiming he could have found it near his sister Zinaida's house. During interrogations, he also stated that his wife loved him, that she did not deserve such an end, that he believed until the very end that they could be together again and everything would work out. Oksana and Lucio countered this claim, stating that it was a lie. Zinaida had fled because she was afraid of him, felt under constant pressure and control. At the hearing, one of the first to speak was her sister, 32-year-old Oksana. She recounted how she heard a muffled cry for help in her sleep. Instinctively, she felt it was Zinaida. Upon opening her eyes, she heard it again and realized she was right. She immediately woke her husband, and together they rushed into the street, where they saw Maurizio. The attack was ongoing. He was holding Zinaida by the throat, striking her repeatedly. The prosecutor's office rightly labeled this act an extreme form of cruelty, as the criminal was completely out of control. Even in front of witnesses, the assault continued. This brutal act left 3 children without a mother and father. Oksana's words were substantiated by her husband, Lucio, his brother, Alessandro, and her neighbor, Riccardo Pacini. They all witnessed the moment of the attack but did not have time to intervene. Everything happened too quickly. When they approached, Maurizio fled. Zinaida's 18-year-old daughter, Vitalia, also participated in the trial. Mauricio's 2 youngest daughters, aged 9 and 13, were not present in the courtroom. They did not want to interact with their father, who had left them orphaned. The girls were placed in Oksana's care. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified that he found 18 wounds on Zinaida's body. 3 of these wounds were inflicted on her face and were identified as defensive injuries on the victim's arms. Another 8 wounds were located on her neck, indicating that this was likely the target area of the killer, as his actions did not correspond with typical unintentional murder. One of the most dangerous blows punctured the aorta at the base of her neck, resulting in severe bleeding. Just a few minutes later, Zinaida lost consciousness and subsequently died. Her relatives held her in their arms during her final moments as she faded before their eyes, bleeding to death until the rescue service arrived. Her last words were, "I can't breathe anymore." Only after hearing her last words did he decide to flee. At that moment, a kitchen knife fell to the ground, which was later found by the police. The prosecution insisted that the attack was premeditated, as the knife found matched one from Mauricio's kitchen set, which was missing from his home. The lawyer tried to justify the defendant in an implausible manner, claiming that he had found a blade near his sister Zinaida's house. Despite this, Mauricio's lawyer continued to advocate for a mitigated sentence and insisted on a psychiatric examination. According to the lawyer, there had been a systematic deterioration in Mauricio's mental state, which became apparent several days before the crime. On that day, Zinaida stated that he had become obsessive, possessive, and much more aggressive than usual. Just before the incident, Zinaida told her sister that her husband had tried to strangle her with a belt from a robe. When Oksana's husband came to help with a move, he noticed that Zinaida's internet cables had been cut, which seemed strange. Furthermore, Mauricio took her mobile phone, indicating that the situation was spiraling out of control. The lawyer believed these were signs of mental problems. However, the relatives of Zinaida did not want to allow the killer to receive a lenient sentence due to claims of insanity. Oksana claimed that her sister had considered breaking up 8 years before the tragedy. Oksana said Zinaida felt like a victim and was afraid that her husband could be dangerous, but she stayed in the relationship for the sake of their children. Zinaida's relatives said she described a miserable 10-year marriage. Mauricio ended his own life, as he had promised, while in custody during the trial. His lawyer commented on his client's death. The hearing shocked Mauricio. He could not bear the shame and disgrace, especially since some aspects, according to him, did not correspond to reality. He was particularly taken aback by witness testimonies that described 10 years of torment, during which his wife had suffered and was denied a divorce. Mauricio expressed regret for his actions but realized he could not turn back time to alter the circumstances of his wife's death. He feared that his daughters would be compelled to testify against him, which would have been an even greater blow. Consequently, Mauricio decided to end his life. He left several suicide notes for his family, but their contents remain unknown. The brutal murder of Zinaida Solinari on October 6, 2019, in Cologno al Sirios marked a devastating loss for her family and the community. Fleeing an abusive marriage, Zinaida sought refuge with her sister Oksana days earlier, hoping to protect her 3 daughters. Her courage to reclaim her independence triggered Maurizio Quattroci's jealousy, culminating in a premeditated attack that ended her life. The court's focus on the crime's brutality underscored the gravity of femicide, a persistent issue in Bergamo, where women like Zinaida faced danger from intimate partners. Zenaita's story is a stark reminder of the urgent need for stronger protections and awareness to prevent such tragedies, ensuring no woman pays the ultimate price for seeking freedom. Ana Nezovic, a U.S. citizen, had moved to Madrid after 13 years of marriage to take some time for herself and start anew. While in Madrid, she was involved in finalizing her divorce, making future plans, and keeping in touch with her family and friends. On February 2nd, Ana made her last known phone call. The very next day, messages began arriving from her phone, raising immediate concerns. One of her close friends quickly noticed that the texts did not sound like Ana. Ana was born in 1983 in Colombia to a family that valued traditional Balkan customs. Her upbringing emphasized the importance of family, discipline, and education. Growing up, she was known for her neatness, organizational abilities, and independence, traits that remained with her throughout her life. Later, Ana moved to the United States, became a U.S. citizen. Living in here opened up new career and personal growth opportunities for her. She became fluent in English, honed her professional skills, gradually became a part of her local community. Ana always prioritized education, self-improvement. She choosing to live a quiet and unassuming life away from the public eye. In the early 2000s, Ana met David Nezovic in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Their relationship progressed quickly. They then moved in together and got married. As their personal relationship grew, they became business partners as well, founding a company focused on tech support and IT solutions. David took care of the technical aspects of the business, while Ana managed organization and long-term strategy. Eventually, they began investing in real estate, acquiring properties throughout Florida. From the outside, their life together seemed stable. They had a thriving business, a home, and a comfortable lifestyle, giving the impression of a couple on the path to financial independence. However, underlying issues were developing. Friends and acquaintances were largely unaware of the growing problems in their marriage. Over time, serious conflicts arose, including financial disagreements and deeper personal issues. By 2023, Ana and David's marriage had deteriorated to a breaking point. Those close to them reported they were in the midst of a separation, with asset division becoming the main focus. This included both their tech business and several real estate properties. Although they had not yet finalized the divorce, both were already preparing for it. Negotiations had started, disagreements emerged, and tensions were rising. With the conflict escalating, Ana chose to temporarily leave the U.S. In December 2023, she moved to Madrid, renting an apartment in the upscale Salamanca neighborhood. She explained that this move was essential for distancing herself from the stress, gaining clarity, and closing a chapter in her life. She repeatedly stated that she wasn't seeking a new relationship or distractions. Her goal was simply to regain her balance. After settling in Spain, Ana made her new place feel like home, began therapy, maintained close contact with friends, and started planning short trips across Europe. Her time in Madrid wasn't an escape, it was a way to step back from the overwhelming conflict she faced in Florida. However, just a few weeks into this new life, an unexpected event brought her independent journey to a sudden and troubling end. After moving to Madrid, Ana maintained a close friendship with her longtime friend, Sana Remo, who was living in Florida. They talked every day, despite the time difference. Their friendship had a strong foundation, and they often traveled together. Ana trusted Sana completely, often sharing her thoughts, feelings, and daily experiences with her. Their text messages showed that Ana was open about her adjustment to life in Spain. In mid-January 2024, the two friends traveled to Austria together. After their trip, they made plans to meet again in Madrid, with Sana set to arrive on February 8th. Before that, Ana had arranged a short trip to Barcelona with another friend on February 5th. They had already booked their tickets for the trip, which was not just a vacation but also included attending a conference. Ana had discussed their plans and was excited about the upcoming journey. On the evening of February 2nd, Ana had a phone call with Sana around 8:30 p.m. local time. They spoke for over an hour. Ana mentioned that she planned to stay in that night and had no plans to go out. She appeared calm and talked about her day, sharing details about errands and household chores. Their conversation ended around 10 p.m., which is the last confirmed time anyone had contact with Anna. The next morning, February 3rd, Sana received a text from Anna's number. It said, "I met an amazing man. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We're heading there. The signal might be weak. I'll call you when I return." Soon after, another message arrived. "After my therapy session yesterday, I took a walk. He approached me on the street, and we instantly connected. I've never felt like this before." Sana felt something was off about the messages. She knew Anna well. She was cautious and would never leave town with a stranger without informing someone. Sana responded immediately, but there were no further replies. Her calls also went unanswered. At first, she tried to convince herself that Anna might indeed be in a place with poor reception. However, her concern quickly escalated into alarm. That same day, another friend of Anna's received similar messages. The text felt strange. The wording was flat and lacked Anna's usual style. What struck her as odd was the dialect, which sounded very different from Anna's typical speech. They mentioned that the text seemed like it had been translated from another language using an automatic translator. The theory was logical. The message sounded awkward and overly formal, which made him uncomfortable. Both Sana and Anna's friend quickly figured out that Anna hadn't written those messages herself. They compared them to their previous conversations and immediately noticed the difference. Anna's actual texts were vibrant and filled with her distinctive expressions, none of which were present in these messages. Furthermore, the content of the messages didn't match her recent actions at all. The next day, Sana did everything she could to contact Anna. She reached out to their mutual friends, tried tracking her location using apps, and even called local hospitals. However, nothing worked. Although Anna's phone was on, she did not answer. After, Sana quickly contacted the Madrid police. She explained that Anna's sudden silence was very unusual and that the messages had a tone that Anna wouldn't normally use. However, the authorities did not act right away. They viewed Anna as an adult who had the right to make her own choices, including leaving town without notifying anyone. Officially, her disappearance was not deemed suspicious. Police stated they could not start an investigation without evidence that Anna was missing against her will. They believed the unusual texts and her lack of communication were insufficient. The only definitive point they recognized was February 5th, the day Anna was supposed to travel to Barcelona. Authorities indicated that if she did not arrive at the station or reach out by that date, her absence would be considered a formal missing persons case. As a result, no significant actions were taken for 3 days after Anna stopped responding. The police did not check her phone records, search her apartment, or look into her recent activities. After Anna went missing, her friends tried hard to find her. They called and texted her repeatedly and even contacted people in Madrid, but nothing worked. On February 5th, Anna was supposed to be at the train station but didn't show up, and none of her phones were answering. It was only then that authorities officially declared her a missing person. That same day, a request was made to the court for permission to search her apartment and access her phone records. However, the request was denied by a judge due to a lack of evidence suggesting any crime had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, loud noises, or aggressive behavior. Therefore, there was no legal basis for allowing a search or accessing her private information. Days later, when law enforcement entered Anna's apartment, they found that the door was locked from the outside. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her belongings were in order, there were no signs of a struggle, and nothing valuable was missing. However, the fact that her home was undisturbed raised serious concerns about her disappearance. It indicated that she might have either left voluntarily and never returned or that someone took her out without breaking in. Anna's brother, Felipe Henao, kept in close contact with Spanish authorities but pointed out that coordinating internationally was difficult. He shared with reporters that the investigators in Madrid had limited English proficiency and that U.S. officials had not yet provided significant assistance. He expressed worry about the lack of communication among Spanish police, the FBI, and the U.S. consulate. Despite the disappearance of a U.S. citizen under mysterious circumstances abroad, the initial days following Anna's vanishing were poorly managed. This was a critical time when they could have gathered fresh evidence, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed phone activity or camera footage. Instead, valuable time was wasted, assuming Anna left on her own. This assumption delayed a prompt response and may have impacted the investigation's course. On the 4 days later after Anna Knežević disappeared, staff at her apartment complex provided police with crucial information that changed the investigation. This information was about the night of February 2nd, which was the last time Anna had been in contact. A building administrator reported that several surveillance cameras at the entrance and along the building's facade had been disabled around 9:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before Anna stopped responding to her friend. When security personnel reviewed the recordings, they noticed that the camera lenses had been intentionally covered. The footage showed a person in dark clothing and a motorcycle helmet approaching the outdoor cameras. He spraying paint directly onto the lenses to obscure them. Afterward, he waited for someone to exit the building, which allowed him to slip inside. Once inside, he targeted the camera in the elevator area, spraying paint over its lens as well. This act appeared to be deliberate. The individual seemed to know where the surveillance devices were and how to disable them quickly, discreetly. The building staff confirmed that the security systems had been tampered with. They provided copies of the footage to Spanish investigators, which was the first visual evidence indicating possible outside interference. However, identifying the person in the video was impossible due to his helmet and dark clothing. The individual's face was completely covered, and their body type did not offer enough clues for clear identification. Nevertheless, forensic experts noted a few important details. The person's eyes, part of their forehead, and brow line were briefly visible. Investigators believe that this person planned the act meticulously. He brought spray paint and wore equipment intended to prevent leaving any traces behind. His appearance in the footage matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance, raising further suspicions. The targeting of the building's surveillance system and the disabling of specific cameras indicated that the individual was familiar with the layout of the premises, suggesting this was not a random act. It was planned and concerning. Further investigation showed that the exterior camera was spray painted in about 30 seconds, and the interior camera was disabled even more quickly. Every action taken was intentional and confident, with no sign of hesitation or looking around. This led investigators to conclude that the individual knew how long the actions would take and executed them with precision. A staff member confirmed that this man appeared on camera just as residents were leaving. He seized the opportunity to enter the building, indicating that he did not have authorized access. Without a key card or entry code, he was not recognized as a resident. He took a direct route from the entrance to the camera near the elevator, with no stops. The video footage quickly caught the attention of both law enforcement and Anna's friends. Sana, who had reached Madrid by that time, shared the video with journalists, which sparked public interest in the case. Media outlets began to speculate that the man in the helmet might be linked to Anna's disappearance, but his identity and motives remained unknown. After an image from the surveillance footage was made public, the FBI started its own analysis. They noted that even low-resolution footage could be analyzed to compare visual elements with their databases. They concentrated on key facial features that were still visible despite the helmet, such as the shape of the eyes, the space between the eyebrows, the brow ridges, and the upper facial structure. These aspects can often be recognized even when partially hidden. Public curiosity about the footage intensified when it was revealed that the paint used to disable the cameras was from a specific brand, which later appeared in other parts of the investigation. Investigators did not release this detail right away, but they found that the spray can involve match the type and packaging shown in a store surveillance footage. This footage captured a man who looked similar to someone seen at Anna's building buying the same spray can. After Anna stopped answering calls and messages, her friend Sana reached out to her husband, David Knežević, on February 4th. During their conversation, Sana learned that David was in Florida. She proposed that they travel to Madrid together to help search for Anna, and David agreed, even discussing a specific flight from Miami for the next day. However, when the time arrived, he did not show up and later claimed to be in Serbia. This unexpected turn left Anna's friends confused. David was aware that his wife had gone missing under mysterious circumstances in a foreign country. He had the ability to fly to Spain, yet he chose to go to Serbia instead. This decision was puzzling. Instead of participating in the search, he went to a third country where his relatives live. Questions naturally arose. Why didn't he go to the location where his wife disappeared? Why didn't he join the search effort? Sana grew increasingly concerned about David's behavior. While he did not openly dismiss her, his reactions felt distant and confusing. His actions seemed illogical. Although the first few days were critical, he did not attempt to go to Madrid. He believed there was nothing he could do in Spain because he did not speak Spanish, had no place to stay, and was unfamiliar with the city. His lawyer supported this view, explaining to reporters that going to a country without any local connections would not be useful. He also mentioned that David was worried about Anna's disappearance but felt that being there in person would not make a difference. After Anna went missing, David hired a lawyer in Florida. The lawyer reported that David had been in contact with the FBI and had shared all necessary information, including credit card statements and his efforts to find legal assistance in Spain. However, none of these actions involved him participating in the search directly. Despite providing some information, David stayed distant and avoided making any public comments. After Florida police confirmed that David reported a theft in January, several questions emerged. He alleged that $5,000 in cash and personal items were stolen from his unlocked car. In the morning, he found the passenger door slightly open. Security cameras near his home did not capture the theft, and the police could not identify any suspects. Although there was no initial connection to Anna's case, the report became suspicious in light of subsequent events. David's trip to Serbia created further controversy. He asserted that he left the U.S. before Anna's disappearance and remained abroad during that time. However, Saw mentioned a phone call with him on February 4th, in which he stated he was in Florida, suggesting he might have flown to Serbia after that conversation. There was no official confirmation from border control authorities at that time. David's attorney provided his passport as evidence that he had left earlier, but these inconsistencies raised doubts and increased suspicion regarding his involvement. The situation became more complicated due to a property dispute that had intensified months before Anna disappeared. With shared assets about to be divided, suspicion was understandable. This divorce was not just ordinary, it involved significant financial stakes and joint possessions. Anna's friends noted that their relationship had turned hostile. In contrast, David and his lawyer claimed the divorce was amicable, arguing that they had simply grown apart. At that time, David had not been charged with any crime and was located outside the U.S. However, his absence during the search for Anna and inconsistencies in his statements raised concerns among investigators. While David insisted he had no involvement in Anna's disappearance, a growing list of circumstantial evidence caught the attention of both police and the FBI. In May 2024, U.S. authorities arrested David at Miami International Airport, just after he arrived on an international flight. He was taken into custody by the Diplomatic Security Service and the FBI without any issues. This was the first official action that connected him to Anna's disappearance. He faced charges related to the abduction of a U.S. citizen outside the country, based on a series of indirect but related pieces of evidence uncovered during a multinational investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence was surveillance footage collected by investigators in Spain and Serbia. At a store close to Anna's apartment in Madrid, cameras captured a man who looked like David buying a can of spray paint and duct tape. Forensic analysis showed that the spray paint was the same brand used to disable the security cameras in Anna's building, as the label and color were identical. Investigators viewed this as evidence of premeditation. Additionally, authorities tracked a rental car used by David in Serbia. GPS data indicated that the car entered Spain, traveled through Madrid, and then moved into northern Italy before returning to Serbia. The precise tracking of this route led investigators to believe that Anna's body may have been transported in that vehicle. A stop in a wooded area of northern Italy raised particular interest, prompting coordinated searches by both Italian and Spanish law enforcement. As of that time, no remains had been discovered, but the theory that Anna's body was transported remained a central focus of the investigation. A key piece of evidence came from surveillance footage in Anna's apartment building. Investigators released a video showing a man, matching David's physical description, exiting the elevator with a large suitcase on the same night Anna disappeared. Though his face was obscured, the timing and situation aligned with other findings in the investigation. Authorities suspected that the suitcase might have been used to remove Anna's body from the apartment. David's rental car, which he had picked up in Serbia, was eventually returned to the rental agency. An inspection revealed that the car's mileage had increased by over 4,800 miles. Additionally, it had been modified with tinted windows, which were not part of the original rental terms. These changes raised suspicions. Investigators also found that the car was operating with false license plates during a time it was believed to have been used for cross-border travel. Spanish police recorded a sighting of a similar vehicle near the location where Anna disappeared, but they could not identify the driver because of the tinted windows and fake plates. The FBI linked several crucial pieces of evidence: the purchase of materials, disruptions to surveillance systems, the travel route, elevator footage showing a suitcase, and modifications to a car. Their report indicated that all the evidence suggested a planned criminal act and an effort to conceal it. The official statement referred to the case as the abduction of a U.S. citizen abroad, involving a U.S. national. Although no body was found, authorities believed the evidence was strong enough to justify an arrest. David was taken to a federal detention center in South Florida. His lawyers claimed he had cooperated with authorities, willingly shared information, and did not plan to escape. However, prosecutors contended that the substantial circumstantial evidence and the case's context created a significant risk that he might flee. David's arrest was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Until then, he had evaded authorities and avoided speaking publicly. Now, he was the focus of a federal case. The next step was to decide if he would remain in custody until the trial. After his arrest in Miami, David's first court appearance centered on his request for bail. The judge denied the request, citing a high risk of flight, and noted that the actions surrounding Anna's disappearance seemed well planned and executed. The judge highlighted the planning and sophistication as reasons for keeping David in detention. David's legal team appealed the decision, arguing that he posed no danger and did not intend to flee. They proposed a substantial bail amount, an ankle monitor, a travel ban, and home confinement. The defense emphasized David's long-term residence in the U.S., his clean record, and his willingness to cooperate with authorities. However, the court stood. The defense's main argument was that David could not have been in Spain when Anna disappeared. His lawyer presented passport stamps and travel records to show he arrived in Serbia well before February 2nd, claiming that David physically could not have been in Madrid at the time of the incident. The lawyer also noted that David did not speak Spanish, had no ties or residence in Spain, which would have made it difficult for him to plan such an act. Prosecutors were firmly opposed to the defense's claims. They pointed out that David's travels across Europe closely matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance. The evidence included the rental car's route, purchases of specific items, and other activities that suggested he had premeditated the act. Although there was no direct evidence, the prosecution insisted that the strong circumstantial evidence pointed to his involvement. To bolster their case, they presented the court with message transcripts, surveillance footage, phone records, and an analysis of David's behavior. It was argued that some of David's actions could not be mere coincidences. The judge acknowledged that the prosecution had built a substantial body of circumstantial evidence that created a convincing narrative. Although Anna's body had not been found, the evidence indicated that her disappearance involved aggressive intent and likely implicated David specifically. The judge addressed the defense's claim that the evidence was inadequate by clarifying that the requirement for bail is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. This means the court does not need absolute proof of guilt, only a significant likelihood of risk, like the chance of fleeing or obstructing the investigation. Therefore, the court chose to keep David in custody. His legal team announced they would appeal the bail denial and have filed a formal complaint with the district court, which can review the decisions of lower courts. As the main trial was approaching, David stayed in federal custody. The trial was expected to be lengthy, including expert testimony and international collaboration, and was likely to receive significant media coverage. Investigators began focusing on a woman, identified by the FBI, who might have helped create the suspicious text messages that seemed to come from Ana on February 3rd. This woman, fluent in Spanish, had previously interacted with David via a dating app. The texts sent from Ana's phone were in Spanish and did not match her usual writing style. As mentioned earlier, her close friends quickly noticed that the phrasing resembled a machine translation, a viewpoint later confirmed by linguistic forensic analysis. The defense maintained that there was no direct evidence linking David to the crime. His attorneys highlighted that no one had seen him at Ana's apartment, and there was no evidence of contact between them on the day she went missing. They also questioned the reliability of surveillance footage that showed a man with a suitcase, arguing that it could depict someone else, as the resemblance was not conclusive. Additionally, they emphasized that there had been no official confirmation of Ana's death through forensic evidence. On April 28, 2025, it was reported that David Nezovich, who had been charged with the abduction and presumed death of his wife, Ana, was found dead in his cell at a federal detention center in Miami. His attorneys stated that he took his own life, and no suicide note was discovered. At the time of his death, he had been held without bail while awaiting trial. Ana's family expressed deep sadness and frustration over the situation. Since the trial did not take place, Ana's whereabouts remain unknown. Her loved ones believe that David took the answers about what really happened on the night she disappeared with him. In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives' focus towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, the case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, in January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, the fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, the lawsuits argued that the investigator sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught. On April 27, 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was shaken to its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who was found dead in Lumber River State Park, North Carolina. She had been married to a local pastor, John Paul Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. What secrets lay hidden within Micah and John's marriage? How could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? Micah and John first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, as she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, John was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, John was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship. When Micah turned 18, it was John who officiated her marriage to one of his friends. Both Micah and her husband were involved in the church, with Micah having several responsibilities, including working with the media team while her husband was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah became John's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. John was already married and was the father of 5 children. One day, while Micah was babysitting for John's kids, his wife discovered her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. It was clear that the two had developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah's and John's marriages ended in divorce in 2016. Just 2 years later, the 23-year-old Micah found herself thrust into a new role as the stepmother to John's 5 children, becoming the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, even traveling abroad on mission trip. Her dedication to her faith and the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with John remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church grew, so did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she was subjected to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse, throughout her marriage. Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced, alleging that John had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her. Despite the overwhelming control John exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023, Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps toward reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying John's will. Just months later, in October, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her abusive marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience, as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's choice to leave John came at a significant cost. She reached out to the police multiple times after feeling that someone was following her, which added to her anxiety during her attempt to end the marriage. Micah discovered her tires had been slashed and found a tracking device on her car, deepening her fears about John's obsessive need to control her. These events made Micah feel even more vulnerable as she faced the challenges of divorce, constantly anxious about the possible consequences of her decisions. In the months leading up to Micah's tragic death, a series of troubling incidents heightened the sense of danger and mistrust in her relationship with John. As Micah tried to free herself from the marriage and establish her independence, John resorted to increasingly desperate and threatening methods to keep her under his control. In February 2024, Micah's sense of freedom was drastically affected when John had her hospitalized against her will, claiming it was for her health. He alleged that she wasn't taking her medication properly, using this as a reason for her forced admission to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through John's deceit, believing he had exaggerated her mental health issues to gain more control over her. As the divorce proceedings progressed, Micah applied for spousal support, with a hearing set for June 5. This action was a bold statement, indicating that she would not allow John to manipulate her finances indefinitely. However, tensions mounted between them in mid-March when Micah asked John for $2,000 for a trip. John refused her request, suspecting that she would not use the money for its intended purpose. He had ongoing control over their financial decisions. At the same time as this financial dispute, John used his power of attorney to have Micah hospitalized. While she was in the hospital, John took her purse, car keys, and retrieved her car from a parking lot. He claimed he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do upon her release. On the morning of April 27th, surveillance video showed Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's pawn shop, where security cameras recorded her entering at 12:12 p.m. and purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun on her own. Micah's phone search history indicated that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a secluded area in North Carolina. Just before 3 p.m. that day, she made a frantic call to 911. During the call, Micah asked the dispatcher to locate her phone, stating that she was in a national park and was afraid for her life. Her last words to the operator revealed her tragic intentions. She was about to take her own life. This call has sparked intense debate and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim they heard a man's voice in the background, implying that Micah might have been pressured or coerced into making the call. Others argued that the entire call was potentially fabricated, possibly created using AI technology as part of a complex plan involving John. Just over an hour and a half after Micah made her 911 call, Johnny Jacobs, a North Carolina fisherman, discovered a woman's scattered belongings. Jacobs' discovery helped lead law enforcement to Micah's body, which was found in a swampy, wooded area just off the Lumber River. Jacobs reported that afternoon, he heard someone crying in the woods, followed by gunshots. While searching for the source of the sounds, he found Micah's belongings but not her body. He later told media outlets that he saw 3 people in a boat near the scene at the time of the shooting. Jacobs said he asked the 3 boaters, "Did you hear any gunshots?" and they all responded affirmatively. However, the boaters denied hearing any crying. Jacobs eventually traced the source of the sounds to an opening in the river. 20 yards into the opening, he found Micah's fanny pack about 2 feet from the water's edge, along with her cell phone and glasses. According to Jacobs, the fanny pack contained Micah's driver's license, bank cards, keys, wallet, credit cards, and a small Bible. Micah had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her Honda Accord was located in the park's parking lot, where authorities found a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for a firearm she had bought earlier that day. The North Carolina medical examiner ruled that her death was a result of taking her own life by gunshot. However, Micah's family strongly disagreed with this finding, noting the many bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds on her body. They believe that Micah may have been forced or pressured into taking her life rather than doing so willingly. John insists he had no role in Micah's death, claiming he was not present at the time she died. He states he was at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, which is about 3 hours from where Micah's body was discovered. Several eyewitnesses have confirmed that he was at the event. His vehicle also was seen traveling on Highway 17 in Horry County at 2:22 p.m. on April 27. The investigation into Micah's death faced challenges due to many inconsistencies and unanswered questions. For example, the presence of multiple shell casings at the scene raised suspicions that Micah could have been the victim of foul play instead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Additionally, Micah's family and friends believe her actions and behavior in the days before her death did not reflect someone contemplating end one's own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and was planning to go to church with her family the Sunday. The investigation into Micah's death involved both the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, who worked together to gather evidence and understand the circumstances of her death. However, public demand for justice grew stronger, as Micah's family and supporters did not believe the official claim that she committed end one's own life. A key focus of the investigation was the suspicion of John's possible involvement in her death. Allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial misconduct in their marriage contributed to the belief that there was more to the story. As the investigation progressed, John's behavior and comments raised further doubts about his role in the tragedy. Reports described him as increasingly erratic, with actions and statements that seemed aimed at confusing, manipulating others. Just a day after Micah's body was found in the Lumber River, John made an alarming announcement to the Solid Rock Church congregation. Instead of addressing them with the seriousness the situation warranted, his tone was casual and disconcerting. He began by stating that there wouldn't be an altar call that day and asked everyone to stand for an announcement. John then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not to talk about the announcement while still inside. In a strange turn of events, he urged them to keep attending church and fulfilling their responsibilities, mentioning that he would be taking a break for several days or weeks. He then shocked everyone by revealing that his wife had died, claiming it was self-inflicted and had happened in North Carolina. John's behavior during this announcement was troubling. He seemed to be fueled by adrenaline, requested the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also mentioned that Micah had been struggling mentally and needed medication. His comments were particularly alarming because Micah's body had only been discovered less than 24 hours earlier. The coroner had not yet determined the cause of death. Meanwhile, the Robeson County Police were still investigating the case as a suspicious death, yet John had already labeled it a suicide, attributing it to Micah's mental health issues, despite the significant evidence of abuse and manipulation that had existed in their marriage. John denied any wrongdoing, asserting that the allegations of abuse were untrue and that he never harmed Micah. However, Micah's family and friends saw through his claims and refused to believe him. After Micah's death, John's actions raised further alarm. He insisted on immediate cremation and would not allow her family to see her body unless they complied with his demands. Adding to the growing suspicion, John hired a lawyer and sent letters demanding an end to the accusations against him. These letters contained subtle threats, implying that he wanted to silence anyone who questioned his role in Micah's death. As more details about John's behavior came to light, the public's call for justice intensified. Micah's family, friends, the surrounding community demanded answers and urged authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Micah's death progressed, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office became involved, bringing their resources and expertise to the case. However, it was unclear which specific areas the federal authorities were investigating. Micah's family expressed significant concerns about the autopsy, particularly because there was no information regarding gunshot residue. They also questioned why the authorities had not conducted these tests. Additionally, the family was worried about the toxicology report, raising the issue of whether Micah was mentally sound at the time of her death or if she was under the influence of substances. There was no documentation to clarify this. The family's concerns grew when Micah's body was cremated shortly after her death, a decision made by John, which prevented the possibility of a second independent autopsy. This action only increased suspicions that John might be hiding something. As the investigation continued, various theories arose regarding John's possible role in Micah's death. Some suggested that he may have used his boat to transport Micah's body to the remote location where it was discovered. Security footage from the pawn shop where Micah bought the gun also faced scrutiny, with some believing that the timestamps were altered to support a specific narrative. Additionally, the fact that John had been reported to the police for transferring church funds into his personal account raised further suspicions about his motives and integrity. One of the most troubling findings from the investigation was the discovery of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had written to document the abuse she experienced from John. John had contacted Micah's family, trying to obtain these documents, which increased suspicions that they contained evidence against him. Micah's family stated that these diaries now belonged to Micah's sister, Sierra Francis, who was appointed as the special administrator of Micah's estate. The diaries are considered crucial evidence in the ongoing investigation, as they are expected to clarify the true nature of John and Micah's relationship and the circumstances leading to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends strongly believe that John's abusive behavior, manipulation contributed to her decision to take her own life. They highlighted the numerous police reports she filed, which detailed her fears for her safety and the harassment she suffered at John's hands. Additionally, allegations of multiple affairs and financial misconduct further reinforced the perception that John was a man driven by his own desires and willing to go to great lengths to maintain control over others. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, led to various reactions and consequences. Following this, Solid Rock Church, where John was a pastor, became a focal point of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving numerous harassing phone calls and messages from people seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was equally troubling for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who examined Micah's body received threats. Micah's family, particularly her sister Sierra, firmly rejected the official explanation of her death. They believed that Micah's death was planned and staged by John, and they were resolved to find the truth, no matter the challenges. Their unwavering dedication to seeking justice for Micah demonstrated their love and commitment, alongside their strong belief that the authorities had not thoroughly investigated the circumstances of her death. Meanwhile, Jacobs has become one of the most controversial figures in the Micah Miller case. On March 14, 2025, at the intersection of Iona Church Road and Raynham Road, a rural intersection 2 miles from his home, Jacobs, a key witness in the case, died in a collision between 2 vehicles. Death of key witness fuels belief in conspiracy theories. As more information about the case became available, the public's demand for action against John intensified. Micah's supporters, both in the community and on social media, called for authorities to hold John responsible for his alleged involvement in her death. Micah's family's relentless pursuit of justice and the continuous calls for accountability all highlight the deep, lasting effects of this tragedy on everyone involved. Shanti Cooper was a devoted mother to her son, Jackson, 8, who she shared custody of with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. After separating from Jim in 2013, Shanti was ready to begin dating again. She quickly realized that online dating had become the common way to meet people, so she decided to give it a try by creating a chat account. While exploring different profiles on the site, Shanti connected with a few men, but none impressed her quite like David Trance. David had also recently ended a year-long marriage, was looking for something fresh and exciting. Their relationship deepened through phone calls, text messages, and emails. After several months of getting to know each other, David made a significant decision to move to Orlando, Florida, to be closer to Shanti. Their relationship evolved into something more intimate, while Shanti remained committed to her son. She made sure that her time with David didn't compromise her responsibilities as a mother, always putting Jackson's well-being first and ensuring that everyone understood the importance of a healthy family dynamic. In 2015, Shanti and David relocated to Delaney Park, an upscale suburb close to downtown Orlando. This neighborhood is known for its beautiful environment and family-friendly atmosphere, attracting an affluent community. Delaney Park offers a high-quality lifestyle along with an excellent school system that delivers quality education. Its well-maintained landscapes and access to various amenities make it an attractive choice for families looking for a comfortable and safe home. In here, David bought a house for $600,000 in cash. The home is 4,000 square feet, featuring a pool, a garage, and an apartment above it. This spacious property offered them a comfortable living space with plenty of amenities. Shanti and David were excited to settle into their new house and start a new chapter in their lives. However, they soon noticed that some features of the home did not meet their expectations for the future. While they loved their new house, the upstairs bedrooms felt small and were not very functional. Facing this challenge, David and Shanti began a renovation project to turn their house into their dream home. Shanti, passionate about design and home improvement, agreed to fund the project. They hired a skilled team of contractors who completely dismantled the house to rebuild the upstairs bedrooms and create a new layout that met their vision. During the renovation, the bedrooms were unusable, so Shanti moved into the apartment above the garage. This arrangement allowed her to maintain her daily routine without interruption and provided a dedicated workspace. David, on the other hand, stayed in a makeshift area in the garage, spending quality time with their dogs. David became deeply invested in the restoration. It was no longer just a project but a vital part of his life. He spent every waking moment monitoring the work, making adjustments, ensuring every detail was carefully planned and executed. His entire focus was on the renovation, and the house began to take on a character of its own. In 2018, 3 years after starting the renovation project, there was barely any progress. The inside of the house had been completely stripped down, leaving only the bare structure. Seeking a solution, David reached out to a local home renovator known from the successful A&E reality show, Zombie House Flipping. This show features real estate investors who buy and renovate rundown homes. The show's producer contacted David and Shanti about their home in Delaney Park to see if it could be included in the next season. During the chaos of their home renovations, David and Shanti got married in 2017, which surprised many friends and family. Shanti, who is naturally private, even kept the marriage a secret from her beloved grandmother. By mid-April 2018, the show Zombie House Flipping planned to start filming at David and Shanti's home in May. However, the producer struggled to get them to discuss how the show would proceed. The producer noticed a clear contrast between David's excitement and Shanti's apparent disinterest. David was eager about the flipping series, while Shanti seemed to participate just to support her husband. The tension over their home was evident, as Shanti had invested a lot of money in the renovations, yet her name wasn't even on the trust that owned the house. Although David promised to include Shanti on the trust, he did not follow through, leading to further issues in their relationship. By the end of April 2018, David and Shanti seemed to be doing well. However, on April 24, 2018, at 3:51 p.m., David called 911 in a panic, saying he had found his wife, Shanti, in the bathtub and that she wasn't breathing. During the call, David's screams were audible as he desperately tried to explain the situation. When the police arrived at their home, they discovered Shanti had passed away in the bathtub. The area was secured, and an investigation began, while David was taken to the police station for questioning. David recounted to investigators that the morning had started normally. He said Shanti woke up between 7 and 7:30 a.m. At around 9:30 a.m., he left for a 1-hour walk, leaving Shanti at home. When he returned, he claimed he took measurements for renovations. After that, David stated he left again around noon to take their dogs to an off-leash dog park near the Orlando Executive Airport. He mentioned that he frequently visited this park to let the dogs play and enjoy the open space. He added that he hadn't spoken to Shanti before leaving the house and assumed she was in the garage apartment relaxing. David told the detectives that after returning home from the dog park, he went outside to do yard work. He worked for about 30 minutes before deciding to go inside. Once inside, he heard water coming from the bathroom, which intrigued him, so he went to check it out. As he approached, he noticed that the bathroom door was slightly open. When he pushed it open, he was shocked to find his wife, Shanti, unconscious in the bathtub, with her body partially submerged in water. In a panic, he called 911 to report what he had found. During the interview, David mentioned that Shanti had been excited about their future and the plans they had for their home. They were both looking forward to a happy life together. Although David seemed distraught and his account of finding Shanti appeared credible, the detective had doubts. There were inconsistencies in his story that raised concerns. When police officers arrived at Trant's home after David's call, they noticed that the bathroom was completely dry, which would be unusual if David had genuinely tried to save his wife from a bathtub filled with water. This detail cast doubt on the truth of David's account. The extent of Shanti's injuries contradicted David's explanation of how she fell into the tub. When her body was examined at the crime scene, it was clear she had extensive blood and bruises that couldn't be attributed to just a fall. An autopsy determined that Shanti died from blunt force trauma and strangulation, marking her death as a homicide. These inconsistencies led the detective to question David about the differences in his account. The detective questioned David about the blood found on Shanti's bed. David claimed it was from her menstrual cycle, but the amount discovered was puzzling and raised more doubts. The detectives explored various theories about why David might have killed Shanti. To provoke a response from David, the detective inquired if their ongoing home renovations had anything to do with Shanti's death, but David denied any connection. The detective also asked if Shanti was upset with David because her name was not on the house title. David insisted that Shanti had no problem with that. The detective began to suspect that Shanti's death might be linked to her life insurance policy, which would pay out $250,000 to David. During the interview, detectives asked David whether Shanti's death was an accident related to rough intercourse. He denied harming her in any way. Despite his denial, the detectives believed there was enough evidence to implicate him in Shanti's murder. They thought he had pretended to cry during the 911 call and the interview to divert suspicion. However, before David left the police station, he agreed to take a polygraph test. It was late at night, and the detectives couldn't find a polygrapher to conduct the test right away, so they allowed David to go home. Before he left, he provided DNA samples, nail clippings, and fingerprints to the detectives for analysis and comparison with evidence from the crime scene. The detectives hoped these samples would help them find more evidence linking David to Shanti's murder. Investigators who looked into the crime scene at David and Shanti's home found several notable details. Shanti had one earring still on and another on her nightstand, along with her watch, which was also found on the nightstand at the time of her murder. These details were important to the detectives because they indicated that Shanti might have been getting ready for bed when she was attacked. Additionally, her cell phone was on the nightstand, but there had been no activity on it after 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2018. The medical examiner's report showed that Shanti had no defensive wounds, suggesting she was caught off guard by the attack. Detectives theorized that Shanti was sitting on the edge of her bed, taking off her jewelry when David attacked her from behind, leading to her death. They believed David then moved her body into the bathtub. Another important discovery was that nothing seemed to have been stolen from the house, leading the detectives to rule out robbery as a motive. However, Shanti's $155,000 engagement ring was missing. As the investigation progressed, detectives found that David's description of his happy marriage with Shanti clashed with what others believed about their relationship. David often hid Jackson's toys and only returned them when Jackson asked for them. The detectives suspected that David was using these tactics to manipulate both Shanti and her son. While searching the garage where David was sleeping, they found an unplugged refrigerator filled with children's toys. This finding reinforced the detectives' belief that David was engaged in manipulative behavior by intermittently hiding Jackson's toys. David appeared to be trying to control the emotions of Shanti and her son. After detectives executed a search warrant at Shanti and David's home, they seized the couple's computers. On Shanti's computer, they discovered notes revealing her dissatisfaction with her marriage to David. In these notes, Shanti described David as cheap, controlling, and narcissistic. She wrote that he never paid when they went out to eat, and on the rare occasions he did, he would make excuses, claiming he forgot his wallet. Shanti shared feelings of sadness and loneliness, expressing her fear. She desired to no longer be part of their life together. She indicated that her mental unhappiness was largely due to her difficult interactions with David. Additionally, the notes showed that living in a house under construction added significant stress to her life. As the detectives investigated Shanti's murder, they uncovered significant information linking David to her death. It was found that Shanti had been hospitalized for 3 days prior to her body being discovered. The detectives learned that she had expressed worries about her eating habits, telling her nanny that she could no longer tolerate spicy foods or drink alcohol. Furthermore, Shanti was experiencing rapid weight loss, which raised more suspicion among the investigators. They were confused by the toxicology tests conducted during her autopsy, which did not reveal any toxic substances in her body. Despite the lack of evidence, they began to suspect that David might have been poisoning Shanti, but they were uncertain about the specific substance responsible, as nothing was detected in the tests. David had been married before he wed Shanti, which prompted detectives to investigate his previous marriage. They found out that his first wife, Carol, suffered from health problems similar to Shanti's. David met Carol on a blind date in 1997, and they married 2 years later. The detectives were concerned about a possible link between Carol's health issues and Shanti's rapid decline in health. Shortly after their marriage, Carol began facing various health challenges, including persistent nausea, fainting spells, severe reactions to spicy foods and alcohol. Some of her close friends suggested to the detectives that David might have started poisoning her after they got married. To learn more about David's past, the detectives traveled from Florida to Minnesota in November 2018 to interview Carol in person. During the recorded interview, Carol described her struggles with chronic pain and immune system problems that remained undiagnosed. She stressed the need to understand her background to grasp the context of her health issues and mentioned that David was the one who cooked their meals during their marriage. The detectives asked Carol about the possibility that David was involved in her health issues, noting it was suspicious that both of his ex-wives faced similar health problems. Carol firmly denied any suggestion that her ex-husband had poisoned her, stating that her health issues continued even after they separated. During the investigation into Shanti's murder, detectives received a call from an employee at Club Orlando, a private men's spa. The club provided amenities like hot tubs, pools, a gym, and dark rooms for intimate activities. To become a member, individuals needed to buy a pass or membership. The employee informed the detectives that David had multiple memberships at Club Orlando and renewed them every 6 months without exception. He claimed to have seen David engaged in intimate activities with other men. Conversations with Shanti's friends revealed that she would never accept her husband having same intimate relationships. This raised the question of whether Shanti had discovered David's actions and threatened to leave him. As the investigation progressed, the detectives thoroughly reviewed all evidence, including information from an employee at Club Orlando. They sought to find out if David's spa membership and the reported intimate activity could shed light on Shanti's death. When the forensic results arrived from the state crime lab, they revealed Shanti's DNA under David's fingernails and his fingerprints were the only ones found in the bathtub. This evidence contradicted David's story, in which he stated that Shanti had accidentally fallen while entering the tub. The detectives had anticipated finding Shanti's fingerprints in the tub as well, but they were absent. On August 29, 2018, David was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and he was denied bail. His friends were shocked by the news, as they found it hard to believe he could be responsible for Shanti's murder. They suspected that the police were looking for an easy resolution and not thoroughly investigating to find the true culprit. However, the detectives carried out a detailed investigation, following all leads regarding Shanti's murder before making the arrest. Additionally, the detectives considered Shanti's ex-husband, Jim Cooper, as a potential suspect due to their rocky divorce, which raised concerns about whether Jim might have harmed Shanti. After interviewing Jim, the detectives were able to eliminate him as a suspect based on his alibi. After David was arrested, police searched his mother's home in Orlando, where he had been living. In a suitcase, they found Shanti's missing engagement ring, which had gone missing the night she was murdered. This discovery strengthened their case against David. On April 18, 2019, almost a year after Shanti's murder, prosecutor Ryan Vecchio was meeting with Orlando Police Inspector Teresa Sprague when David's attorney called. At the time, David was represented by Robert Mandel, who called after receiving Sprague's investigative report. After some deliberation, Robert Mandel informed him that he had hired private investigator Billy Lane from Prison Break Investigations to investigate the case and that he had some papers in his home. ASA Vecchio asked him where these papers came from and Robert informed him that they were taken from the loft apartment David was staying in at the time of the murder and that the police had missed them. He informed him that these papers had been packaged as evidence and kept by Billy Lane at his office in Lakeland and that they planned to test the blood and DNA at some point. They had now kept these papers for 11 months without revealing them. Inside the brown evidence bag, which was marked and labeled, were bed sheets, a fitted sheet, a pillowcase, and a pair of black socks. Police also found a green cord collected from the Trans home that had been found wrapped around a wooden beam from a ladder. Although the strangulation marks were not easily visible, Shanti had an unusual linear cut on the right side of her neck with possible strangulation marks on both sides. Using gloves and magnifying glasses, investigators examined the entire cord for evidence of blood but found nothing that could be seen with the naked eye or under a magnifying glass. In July 2019, a jailhouse informant came forward with important details about a confession from David. The informant said that Shanti had found text messages on David's phone that exposed his intimate relationships with multiple men. This led to a heated argument where Shanti expressed her anger, threatened to expose him, and demanded a divorce. The informant claimed that David admitted to blacking out before he hit Shanti, which ultimately caused her death. Additionally, the informant stated he had known David before being incarcerated and had seen him at Club Orlando. He also revealed that David mentioned cambo, a toxic secretion from an Amazonian giant monkey frog used in controversial treatments. David had allegedly told the informant that this substance could be a poison that kills without leaving traces in a toxicology report. David's trial was postponed due to the global issue, which affected many legal proceedings across the country. As a result, there were significant delays in his case, lasting almost 2 years. Finally, in 2022, the trial began. However, it took an unexpected turn when both the defense and prosecution's medical experts evaluated David, determined that he was not competent to stand trial, concluding that he was experiencing severe symptoms of schizophrenia. In October 2023, after a 6-day trial, a jury found David Trance guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Shanti's son, Jackson, now lives with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. Shanti, a devoted mother and woman searching for love, stability after a difficult divorce, fell victim to David Trance's manipulative and violent betrayal. Her death at their Delaney Park home, amid a stalled renovation that symbolized the breakdown of their marriage, underscored the dangers of broken promises and hidden motives. David's sentencing in October 2023 brought justice, but it did not erase the pain endured by Shanti's son, Jackson, and her loved ones. On February 17, 2023, in Hexham, England, friends and family gathered to honor 15-year-old Holly Newton at her funeral. Holly was a beloved teenager, known for her kindness. Hundreds of mourners participated in a procession to Hexham Abbey to pay their respects. Holly's mother, Michaela Trussler, shared heartfelt memories of her daughter, stating, "Some people are just too good for this world, and Holly was one of them." Holly's white coffin, decorated with purple flowers and messages of sympathy, was carried along the high street by 4 black horses dressed in purple jackets, her favorite color. One message read, "Sleep tight, beautiful Holly, in the sky until we meet again. Love you forever." She was remembered as a bright, caring young woman with a promising future. Her family and friends described her as compassionate, someone who made a positive impact on everyone around her. Holly enjoyed spending time with friends and engaging in social activities, easily connecting with others thanks to her friendly personality. Holly met Logan MacPhail while participating in Army Cadets, a youth organization focused on military training and activities for young people. This setting often unites individuals with shared interests in discipline and teamwork, which likely helped them bond initially. Their relationship started like a typical teenage romance as they enjoyed each other's company and shared interests. However, as their relationship developed, it became increasingly troubled due to Logan's controlling behavior. Logan's controlling behavior became evident in several ways. He insisted on knowing where Holly was at all times and interfered with her social media by changing her passwords, limiting her ability to connect with others. This is a common sign of someone trying to dominate their partner. Holly's friends and family observed that she was becoming increasingly isolated. Despite these warning signs, Holly initially stayed in a relationship with Logan, which is often the case for teenagers who may not fully recognize the signs of an unhealthy relationship. Michaela mentioned that Logan was Holly's first and only boyfriend, that their relationship had typical teenage ups and downs. Logan spent weekends with Holly's family, and her mother and stepfather were unaware that he was putting on a facade when he visited their home. However, the issues in Holly and Logan's relationship continued to escalate. Eventually, Holly chose to end the relationship due to Logan's obsessive behavior. He struggled to accept the breakup, became even more fixated on her. Michaela observed that her caring and mature daughter was more emotionally developed than Logan, yet when Holly tried to break up with him, he resorted to emotional manipulation, which frightened her. Michaela said she didn't realize the extent of the turmoil Holly was experiencing at that time. Logan had become fixated on Holly, believing that if he couldn't have her, no one else could. She also noted that she didn't recognize the warning signs of his controlling behavior until it was too late, and she was unaware of the emotional distress Holly was facing while trying to break up with Logan. Logan's reaction to the breakup was intense. He started following Holly around town, attempted to control her life. On the night of January 26th, he appeared unexpectedly outside her house and had to be taken home by the police. Holly and her parents were planning to meet with the police to discuss their concerns about Logan, but a tragic event occurred. After Logan showed up at their home uninvited and insisted on speaking to Holly, her mother, Michaela, reached out to Northumbria Police for help. They scheduled a meeting for 4 p.m. on January 27th, but Holly requested to delay it so she could go out with friends after school. The meeting was postponed to the evening, but just hours before it was set to happen, a terrible incident occurred involving Holly. In the investigation of Holly's case, detectives uncovered disturbing CCTV footage that showed the moments leading up to her death. The timeline of events from the day after Logan appeared uninvited at Holly's home was pieced together. Unable to accept their breakup, MacPhail left his school early the next day, carrying a kitchen knife in his backpack. He took a bus to Hexham, waited for Holly to go into town. Dressed entirely in black, with a face mask and baseball cap to hide his identity, MacPhail followed Holly and her friends as they visited a leisure center for about 45 minutes. During this time, he also sent several voice messages to people close to Holly, trying to persuade her to meet him in person. After following Holly, MacPhail, then 16, waited at a bus stop and asked to speak to Holly after she came out of the pizza shop. He then lured her into an alleyway and attacked her. MacPhail inflicted 36 knife wounds, including 5 defensive wounds, in the attack earlier in the evening. When her friend heard her scream, he rushed out of the shop to help, but was also stabbed in the shoulder and leg. Shortly after 5:10 p.m. on Friday, January 27, 2023, the police were alerted about the serious assault of a boy and girl in the Priestpopple area of the town center. Emergency services arrived and found the two in a nearby alleyway with several stab wounds. They were both taken to the hospital. Despite the medical team's efforts, Holly died from 36 injuries. She had broken up with MacPhail just 6 days prior to the attack. Holly's friend, whose identity is protected for legal reasons, received treatment and was later discharged. Officers quickly arrested 16-year-old Logan MacPhail at the scene after he was held by courageous bystanders in a bus shelter. The camera footage shows him identifying himself and naming his victim when the police arrived. He then made what appeared to be a confession, saying she was being too horrible to him, while speaking with an officer in the back of a police van. MacPhail later refused to share his date of birth, claiming he can't read or write, he know nothing. After the attack, MacPhail was charged with killing Holly Newton and injuring another 16-year-old. During police interviews, MacPhail showed a disturbing lack of emotion and admitted that he intended to kill Holly, claiming it was because she treated him horribly. It took 18 months for the case to go to court because MacPhail's lawyers argued that his learning disabilities and autism diagnosis made him unfit to stand trial, meaning he wouldn't fully understand the legal process. However, after reviewing evidence from several experts, the judge determined that MacPhail could participate in the proceedings. Throughout the trial, the defense suggested that his various issues meant he didn't grasp the consequences of his actions, but the jurors disagreed. Justice Hilliard addressed, stating, "Logan aimed to lure Holly into the alleyway, a secluded area where you believed you could attack her without anyone intervening." Hilliard believed Logan had already decided to harm her, as Logan realized from her reactions at the bus stop that she was not interested in rekindling his relationship. Fueled by resentment and jealousy, Logan still managed to plan his attack. Logan waited for the right moment, convinced her to move deeper into the alley. After ensuring a passerby had left, then you took out his knife and launched a brutal assault on her. The judge pointed out that Holly suffered severe knife wounds to her jaw, skull, spine, and shoulder during the attack. Justice Hilliard remarked that inflicting such harm was a horrifying act. Holly's mother was prevented from reaching her in the alley or seeing her in the ambulance due to the dreadful state she was in. The attack was so forceful that the knife broke, with the blade bending significantly. The pathologist mentioned that encountering a knife in such a damaged condition is extremely rare. The judge stated, "He believed you intended to kill her and understood the finality of death." It appears MacPhail carried the knife that day to intimidate Holly by harming himself and decided to attack her when he realized their relationship wouldn't be rekindled just before the incident. Justice Hilliard emphasized, Holly had every right to end the relationship and choose to spend time with others. In concluding his remarks during sentencing, Hilliard acknowledged the significance of the relationship to MacPhail, especially considering his troubled home life. His speech impediment hindered his ability to form relationships and friendships with others, making his bond with Holly's particularly valuable, the judge noting that this contributed to MacPhail's struggle to accept the relationship's end. He noted that while MacPhail expressed remorse, he also demonstrated a tendency to blame Holly. His testimony revealed that he had convinced herself that Holly treated him poorly. Before the verdict was announced, Holly's mother made an emotional statement about the day she learned what happened to her daughter. Mikala said that in the months before her murder, it was clear that Holly was unhappy and no longer wanted to continue the relationship. Because she was so young, she didn't know how to get out of it. For Holly, she often felt sorry for people, which is why she kept going back and moving forward. She said that on Friday, January 27, 2023, their lives changed forever. She mentioned that she had kissed her 4 children goodbye as they left for school, and one of them never returned home. She expressed her disbelief about how any parent could understand receiving a phone call from a stranger saying that their daughter had been stabbed. Those words replayed in her mind as they rushed to the scene, with 2 of her children in the car, crying and scared about what was happening. She stated that she never imagined the horrific reality they would face. Mikala reflected that the look of pure trauma on their children's faces when they saw their sister being taken away in an ambulance was something they would never forget. They conveyed that the gravity of the situation was beyond anything they could express. They added that they would always remember being prevented from seeing their daughter in that alley or in the ambulance, from seeing her open eyes or hearing her last words, knowing that they weren't able to be by her side. They mentioned that they couldn't even hug or touch her in the hospital, stating that their daughter became a crime scene and that she was evidence. Holly's situation is a clear example of domestic abuse. Although the law may prevent from labeling it as such due to her age, Logan was so obsessed with her that he felt if he couldn't be with her, no one else should be either. There is so much media coverage of how many women are killed each year by men, it almost normalizes it for young men like Logan. Things have got to change. MacPhail admitted manslaughter but was convicted of murder as well as wounding with intent. He said he wanted to return some of Holly's belongings, slippers, clothes, and teddy bears, but when he was arrested, he didn't have any of them with him. MacPhail was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 17 years, plus an additional 5 years in prison for intentionally wounding another young man who tried to stop the attack. MacPhail was told that even after serving the minimum term, he would only be released when it was deemed safe to do so. Speaking after the sentencing, Detective Darren Davies of Northumbria Police said it was a truly devastating case, with Holly's future cruelly taken away by MacPhail. Of course, nothing will ever reverse the tragic events of that evening, Detective Davies said, adding that he hopes the result will bring Holly's loved ones a sense of closure so they can attempt to move forward. So many lives have been changed forever by the decisions he made that night, and now he will have plenty of time to think about that in his cell.